Hey guys, welcome to INS's Artistic Pursuits. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this very easy, completely textured card pouch. It has a lot of detailing, one section to hold a single card in, also has a lot of these cross stitch patterns all around, and it is very spacious. It fits 15 to 20 cards in it, plus of course this additional space where you can fit another card or two. You can easily just fit one. We've sewed it on snug so that the card doesn't slide out, and the texture on it also holds the card in place. As you can see, it's very spacious and has a lot of texture and design on it. I guarantee you will never find any other person having a card pouch like this, and everyone's going to ask you where you got it from. I'll let you guys grab your things and let's get started making these card pouches. For this project, I'm using a nylon polyester yarn, one dark olive and an off-white colored yarn. Both of them are about 18 wraps per, they come up to 18 wraps per inch, which is a fine weighted yarn, which is pretty similar to a 4-ply yarn. I'm going to use a 2.5 mm hook for it. Grab some stitch markers, and you will definitely need a tapestry needle in which you can thread your yarn into, because that's what we're going to use to make our cross stitch. And also grab a pair of scissors, and let's get started. Grab the main colored yarn. For this project, we are going to start with the flap of the pouch first, so the smaller section, and then we're going to start increasing our stitches and work our way around. So for that, grab your yarn and make a slip knot. Once you make the slip knot, we are going to make odd number of working chains. So I would like to have 15 stitches, so I'm going to make 15 working chains. You can make any number of chains that you desire, but just make sure that you have odd number of chains so that you have an even pattern. So I'm going to make 15 chains. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, now that is 15 working chains for me. Now we make 2 additional chains. Those don't count as our stitches, or they don't count as our foundation chains. These two last chains that we've added after 15 chains is just our turning chains. So now we are going to work into the 15 chains that we made initially. We are going to make 1 double crochet into each of those stitches. So now these last 2 chains are, like I said, are turning chains. So I'm going to skip those 2 chains, and I'm going to work into the 3rd chain from the hook. So skip the first one, the second one, and work into the 3rd chain over there. And instead of working into this loop, I actually like to work into these back loops of the stitches. So now this is the front of your chain. If you turn around to see the back, you can see these tiny bumps that you can see on the chains. I'm going to work into that. So now since we have to work a double crochet, I'm going to yarn over, like I said, skip the first 2 stitches because those are our turning chains, and into that 3rd chain, that is this back bump, I'm going to insert my hook into that back bump over there and pull up a loop and make my double crochet. So yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops. Now we are going to make 1 double crochet into each of the following chains that we have. We've completed 1 double crochet, and we will have 14 stitches to go. So just go into that back loop of the chain and complete your double crochet. Yarn over, go into that next stitch and complete your double crochet. So make 1 double crochet into each of the stitches till you reach the end of this row. Once you reach the end of this row, you should have a total of 15 double crochets. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed the first row. I'm just working that 15th double crochet into that row 1. So now that completes row 1 for us. Now for row 2, before we start row 2, I actually like to pull this tail up to the top of the stitches through these loops over here. So I just go through these loops on the double crochet like so. Grab this tail and pull it through the double crochet to the top of the double crochet like so. Just wriggle your needle. Yeah, there you go. So I just do that so we can hide this tail when we work the next row. If you don't want to do it, you can always just weave it in later. I like to do this so it kind of reduces an additional work for me to weave this tail in later. So now we chain once and turn our work around to start row number 2. For row number 2, we are going to, since our flap is cross and it's increasing, we are going to increase the number of stitches in this row. So what we are going to do is we're going to go into that first stitch and we are going to make 2 single crochets into that same stitch. So I'm going to go under that stitch, under both the loops of that stitch, of the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. You go back into the same stitch where we just completed a single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop and make another single crochet. So now we have 2 single crochets in that first stitch. Now into the remaining stitches, except for the last stitch, we are going to make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches. So now once we've completed the first stitch, the next 13 stitches, we are going to have 1 single crochet each. And in the last stitch over here, we will have 2 single crochets again. So now after the first increase, we make 1 single crochet into each of those stitches. And I'm also hiding, like I said, I'm also hiding that tail in when I'm working my stitches. So I continue making 1 single crochet till I reach this stitch prior to the last stitch. I'll meet you guys back to do the last stitch together. I've come to the end of row number 2 and I have only 1 stitch remaining. Like in our first stitch, we are going to have an increase in the last stitch. So now I'm going to insert my hook under both the loops, pull up a loop and make 1 single crochet. I go back into that same stitch under both the loops, pull up a loop and make my single crochet. So now after the first stitch increase, we have 13 single crochets into each of the stitches and then we have an increase in the last stitch. So now our row number 2 should have a total of 17 stitches. For row number 3, we chain twice, we turn our work around, and now we are going to have an increase in this row as well. We are also going to have our alpine stitches. So our alpine stitch pattern is going to start right now. So we are going to have these front post treble crochet stitches. So before we start this thing, what we usually will do is the first and the last stitch of every row is going to be a simple double crochet or a single crochet, just so that you have a neat border on the sides. So the first stitch is a double crochet. We make a double crochet in that first stitch. We yarn over twice this time because we're going to make a front post treble crochet stitch along this double crochet over here. So now we are going to make our front post stitch around the stitch double crochets of row number 1. So now if you see, these are your single crochet rows and these are your double crochet rows. So we skip this row completely and we are going to go around this double crochet over here. So now this one over here is actually our turning chains. These are 2 chains. They're just our turning chains and they don't count as a stitch. So we are going to work around this first double crochet. So you yarn over twice. Now you insert your hook to the right of that double crochet and come out of the other side of the double crochet. So now our hook is basically behind that double crochet. We're going to yarn over, pull up a loop. Make sure that the loop is not too tight. Now you yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on your hook. Then you yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. Now that is a front post treble crochet. So that is the alternating of a double crochet and this stitch is what creates that alpine stitch. Now we yarn over, and since we are actually making an increase in this stitch, this alpine stitch we were supposed to have 2 stitches in that first stitch. So now the double crochet and the Alpine, this front post stitch kind of fit for the first double crochet. So we yarn over, and into the very next stitch, this one right here, we insert our hook under both the loops, pull up a loop and make a regular double crochet. So that's our regular double crochet. Now we are going to make a front post double crochet stitch into the next stitch. So ideally we would skip this double crochet and work into the third double crochet, but since we've made an increase over here, we are going to work into this very next double crochet that you can see. So now you yarn over twice like we did for the front post stitch, and we go into the very next double crochet that we worked into from row 1. So we worked into this double crochet first, now we work into the adjacent double crochet. Yarn over, pull through the double crochet and pull up below. Yarn over again, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. Now we have 2 stitches, 2 front post stitches. Now we are going to make a double crochet. So like I said, for this pattern we always alternate with a double crochet and a front post treble crochet. So now we are going to make a regular double crochet. So yarn over, and this time we are going to skip this stitch. So this stitch over here of the previous row is actually part of this front post treble crochet stitch. So we are going to skip that stitch and we are going to work into the stitch after that. Go under both the loops of that stitch. So we've skipped that stitch into this stitch, we yarn over, pull up our loop and make a regular double crochet. Now you can see that's our regular double crochet. Now we yarn over twice because we're supposed to make the front post stitch. Now we are going to skip this double crochet of row number 1 and work into this double crochet after that. So this was the first double crochet, second double crochet, we skip the third one and we're working into that 4th double crochet. So yarn over twice, go into this, skip this double crochet after the front post stitch, go under the next double crochet, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now you yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops and complete your front post treble crochet stitch. So now you can see that you have a gap between these stitches. The reason we don't have a gap over here is just because we're trying to increase our stitches. This is a sole purpose of only trying to increase our stitches. Otherwise you would alternate with double and treble crochets, front post treble crochets with skipping stitches in between. So now you yarn over and we are going to skip the following stitch, and the stitch after that we insert a hook under both the loops, pull up a loop and make our regular double crochet. Now we are going to alternate with, we're going to make a front post treble crochet. Like I said, we yarn over twice and we skip the following double crochet. So now for the pattern till we reach the end of this row, every time we make a double crochet, we yarn over twice, we skip the double crochet right behind under it and work into the double crochet after that over here. So this is a double crochet, we skip and we work into the next one. Yarn over, pull up a loop and complete your front post treble crochet. Now for the next stitch, when we're making the double crochet, we yarn over and we skip the stitch that we just worked into. So the front post treble crochet actually belongs to this stitch. We skip that stitch and into the next stitch we make our double crochet. So now you do this till you reach the end of this row and you will probably just have 1 or 2 stitches remaining. I will come back and show you how I work the last few stitches. So you continue making this pattern of double crochet and front post treble crochet till you reach the end of this row. I'll come back meet you guys once I have a couple of stitches remaining. So we do the last few stitches together. I have just worked this front post treble crochet in the second last double crochet of the last of row number 1. So now I have only 2 stitches remaining on my top row. So we yarn over and make a regular double crochet. So skip this one, and we would have made the regular double crochet in the second last stitch of the previous row. Now we have one, if you see this side, you will notice that we have one more front post treble crochet and a double crochet remaining. So now if you have to even this out, that's what these 2 stitches are remaining. So now we have to, and since it's going to be that increase, since we have that increase, we are going to work into this. We are not going to skip the double crochet. From row number 1, we're going to work into that last double crochet right adjacent to the double crochet that we worked the previous front post stitch into. So now we yarn over twice. We go back, we go into that last double crochet right next to this the stitch that we did this previous front post stitch. So this one right here, pull up a loop and make your front post stitch. Don't worry about that because that's not going to matter. What we are going to do is now we have to complete this row with a double crochet. So we yarn over and into that very next stitch, the last stitch that is available, the only stitch that is available, we are going to make a double crochet in that stitch. So go under both the loops of that stitch, pull up a loop and make a double crochet. So now that completes row number 3, and you can already start seeing that cross slant that you want for the flap. And now at the end of row number 3, we should have a total of 19 stitches. If you want, you can count them to check it. Alright, so now for row number 4, we chain once, we turn our work around, and we are going to actually work 1 stitch into each of the stitches, except for the first and the last. Exactly like row number 2, we are going to have an increase on the first stitch and on the last stitch. So after we change once, we go into that first stitch over there and we make a single crochet. We go back into that same stitch and we make another additional single crochet in that same stitch. So now we have 2 single crochets there. We make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches thereafter. So you should have a total of 17 single crochets. So that's 17 single crochets after the 2 increase. I'm going to make 1 single crochet into each of the stitches till I reach the end, and I only have 1 stitch remaining. So I'll meet you guys back when I have just 1 stitch left to do. I'm on that 17th single crochet after the first initial increase. So after the first 2 stitches, after this increase, I've had 1 single crochet into each of the stitches, which is 17 stitches after the increase, and we have 1 stitch remaining. So now into that stitch, go under both the loops, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. Go back into that same stitch under both the loops, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. So now that completes row number 4. Now by the end of this row, we should have a total of 21 stitches. Now for the next row, what we are going to do is we're going to chain twice, turn our work around, and into that first stitch we are going to make our double crochet. So yarn over, make a double crochet, and since this row also has an increase, we are going to make 1 more stitch into that stitch, and instead of making an alpine stitch right there, we are actually going to yarn over and make 1 more double crochet into that very stitch. So what I did is yarn over, I went back into that same stitch and made a regular double crochet into that very first stitch of the previous row. So now we have 2 double crochets in that same stitch. So that completes the first stitch. Now for the next stitch, we yarn over twice and we're going to make our alpine stitch. So now we are going to make this alpine, the front post treble crochet stitch into the double crochets of the row prior to this row of single crochets. So this was our row of single crochets. When we did the third row, we went and we did our front post stitches around the double crochets of row number 1. So now that we're in row number 5, we will do our front post stitches around the double crochets of row number 3. So this one right here. So we skip these single crochets and into these double crochets over here. So now this one right here is just our turning chain. This too is just our turning chain. It doesn't count as a stitch. This is the first double crochet, the stitch beside this front post stitch. We're going to work around this double crochet now. So we yarn over twice and we go around this double crochet that I just pointed out to you and pull up a loop. Now we complete our front post treble crochet. Once we do that, we turn around to look at our work. Now we are going to skip that first stitch that you can see because that stitch actually belongs to this front post stitch. So we yarn over, skip that first stitch that you can see, and into the next stitch we are going to make a regular double crochet. So now your pattern is taking shape with an increase. Now we're going to just alternate with our front post treble crochets and double crochets, and make sure that every time you make your front post treble crochet, you will work into these double crochets in between these front post stitches. So this is your front post stitch, so you'll work in between into that double crochet in between both those stitches. This one right here, this one right here, this one right here. So you don't have to actually try really hard to make that stitch. So I'll work a few stitches with you and then you can do the rest on your own. So we yarn over twice and now we have to find the double crochet in between both these alpine stitches. So this one right here, go around that double crochet from behind, pull up a loop and make your front post treble crochet. And now like we did in row number 3, we are going to yarn over, skip this following stitch, and into the stitch after that we make a regular double crochet. Next we'll make a front post treble crochet. So yarn over twice, go into that double crochet of that row number 3 that is in between both these front post stitches, pull up a loop and complete the front post treble crochet. Now you can see that your front post treble crochets sit in between the stitches in this row sit in between both your treble crochets and the previous row, the front post stitches of your previous row. So now we make a double crochet, skip that stitch, and into the stitch after that make a regular double crochet and continue making this pattern till you reach the end of the stitches. So you should have maybe 1 stitch remaining or 2. You come back and I'll show you. So I'll work the last front post treble crochet stitches and the last 2 double crochets together with you. So you should have maybe 2 stitches remaining. If you're comfortable completing the row, please go ahead and complete it. You just have to repeat the same thing that you did in row number 3, and all these while a front post treble crochet stitch and then skip this stitch and work this a double crochet into the stitch after that. Continue doing that till you reach the end of this row, and I'll come back and we'll do the last few stitches together. I've just worked the double crochet after this front post stitch in between both these stitches, and now I only have 2 stitches remaining from the previous row. Now what we're going to do is, like we had an increase on this side, we're going to have an increase over here. So for the increase, what we are going to do after doing that double crochet is we're going to yarn over twice, and we are going to work our front post treble crochet into that double crochet that you can see after this front post stitch. So this one right here, just make your front post treble crochet around that stitch. And as per, we would actually yarn over, skip this stitch and make a double crochet in that last stitch over here. So you make a double crochet in that last stitch, you skip that stitch and make the stitch. So now once you make this double crochet, since we want an increase and we had 2 double crochets in the same stitch at the start of this row, we're going to have 2 double crochets in the same stitch at the end of this row. So into that last stitch where we made the last double crochet, go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop and make a regular double crochet. So now that completes row number 5 and all our increased rows. Now after this we don't have any increases in the row for the flap. So this is how the row looks. Now the next row is just chain once, turn your work around, and for this row we are going to have one single crochet into each of the stitches of the previous row. No increase, no decrease, no nothing. We just make one single crochet into each of those stitches. So go into that stitch and make one single crochet. Continue making one single crochet till you reach the end of this row. I'll meet you guys back for row number 7. I have completed row number 6 and I have 23 single crochets in that row. Now for row number 7, we chain twice and turn our work around. We are going to make this stitch. It's going to be very easy, no increase, no decrease, no nothing, just one stitch per stitch. So as per, we're going to make one double crochet into that first stitch over here. So we make one double crochet into that first stitch of the previous row. Now our next stitch is going to be the front post stitch. So we yarn over twice and we make the front post stitch into that double crochet row prior to the previous row. So from row number 5 we're going to work into the double crochets from row number 5. So yarn over twice. Now this first one right here is our turning chain. The one after that is our first double crochet, and then we have a second double crochet. So we are actually going to work our front post stitch into the second double crochet over here. If it's hard for you to find which double crochet it is a stitch prior to this front post stitch. So you yarn over twice. Now this is your front post stitch. Go into the stitch prior to that. So that's the double crochet. Go under that double crochet, yarn over, pull your loop through, yarn over and complete your front post treble crochet. So now that is your first front post stitch of this row. Now yarn over, and the next stitch obviously is a regular double crochet. Now we've skipped that first stitch, and into the stitch after that we make our double crochet. Now we have a front post stitch, front post treble crochet stitch. So yarn over twice, go around that double crochet between both the front post stitches like so, yarn over, pull up a loop and make your front post treble crochet stitch. Now it's a double crochet, yarn over, skip that first stitch that is visible, and into the stitch after that make your double crochet. Now this is very easy, so you just have to alternate between the front post stitch and a double crochet all the way till you reach the end of this row. Your last stitch will be a regular double crochet as per. So when you come to this section, just make sure that you make your front post stitch in the double crochet right next to this front post stitch. So the first of the 2 double crochets. So these are 2 double crochets, and you make your front post stitch in this first double crochet that you can see. So if it's easier to identify, it's always this double crochet right next to this front post stitch. So this is the front post stitch, work around this double crochet, and you make a regular double crochet in that last stitch. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed this row. As you can see, I've completed row number 7, and my last stitch is a regular double crochet. And there you go, this is how it is. And now we've stopped increasing, so you can actually see a straight line on either side of that flap. So now the next row, you guessed it, is a row of single crochets, and like row number 7, we do not have any increase on that row. So we chain once, we turn our work around, and we work one single crochet into each of the stitches of the previous row. So our row number 8 is a row of single crochets. You should have a total of 23 single crochets, like we did in row number 6. So we have 23 single crochets there. Now we're going to have one single crochet into each of the stitches. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed row number 8 with 23 single crochets. That completes my 23rd single crochet for row number 8. Now for row number 9, we chain twice, we turn our work around, and you would have noticed we usually make a double crochet on top of a front post double crochet, front post stitch, and we make a front post stitch around this double crochet in between. So to accommodate that, our first 2 stitches of this row are going to be regular double crochets. So we yarn over, we go into that first stitch, we make a regular double crochet, we yarn over and go into the next stitch, because that next stitch is actually a stitch which sits right on top of this front post stitch, and since we cannot have a front post stitch on top of front post stitch, we make a double crochet on top of that stitch. So go into that next stitch and make a regular double crochet. So now we have 2 double crochet stitches. Into the next stitch is going to be our front post treble crochet. So we yarn over twice, and now we are sitting right on top of this stitch over here. So we go into that row double crochet of row number 7 in between both these front post stitches. We go around that double crochet, pull up our yarn and make our front post treble crochet stitch. Now our next stitch is supposed to be a double crochet, so we yarn over, skip that stitch, and into the stitch after that we make our double crochet. We then make a front post stitch, front post treble crochet into that double crochet of that previous row. Into the double crochet of row number 7, and we continue with this pattern. So we will just continue alternating between double crochets and front post stitches till we reach the end, and you will have a front post stitch in the 3rd last stitch of this row, after which you'll have 2 stitches remaining, and in those last 2 stitches we make 1 double crochet each into those stitches, exactly like we did in the start of this row. We have 2 regular double crochets in the first 2 stitches. The same way, the last 2 stitches will be a regular double crochet, and the stitch prior to that into this stitch right here we'll have 1 front post stitch. So I'll meet you guys back once you've completed this row. I thought I'd show you how I work the last few stitches, just in case you needed some help. So yarn over twice, I've completed a double crochet, and I'm working my last front post stitch into that double crochet over here. So that's the 3rd last stitch of this row. Now after that, like I said, we'd usually make a double crochet, so we'd skip that and we'd make 1 double crochet into this stitch. Just do that, and you would have 1 stitch remaining where we make 1 additional double crochet. So we just go into the last stitch over there and make 1 double crochet. So now that completes row number 9, and that completes the front section of the bag. So now if you see, we've completed this front section of the bag, and now we're going to start working in the back section. Now this piece over here where we have this card slot is actually a separate piece, but the stitches behind that do not have the same pattern as the front piece. It's just so that it can be flat and we're not wasting our pattern. So now these stitches are actually rows of double crochet and rows of single crochet. So now what we are going to do is we're going to work that section at the back. So I will show you what we're going to do next. So for row number 10, we chain once, and as we've done in row number 8 and 6, we're just going to have 1 row of single crochets. So this pattern usually uses a row of double crochets and then a row of single crochets. So we just alternate between those stitches. Just that when we have these double crochet rows, we also have these front post stitches which kind of make that alpine stitch. That's the pattern that we're working for. So now since we've completed a row of double crochets, the next row is a row of single crochets. So now we're going to have 1 row of single crochets, that is 23 single crochets. So just go ahead and make 23 single crochets, and I'll meet you guys back at the end of row number 10 with 23 single crochets done. That is 23rd single crochet of row number 10. Now for row number 11, we are going to chain twice, turn our work around, and we are going to make a whole row of simple double crochets. So we are going to make one double crochet into each of the stitches of the previous row. No front post stitches, no increase, no decrease, no anything different. We just make one double crochet into each of those stitches. So at the end of this row, we should have a total of 23 double crochets. So I'll meet you guys back once I've completed 23 double crochets for row number 11. Now that's the last double crochet of row number 11, and that completes row number 11 for me. Once you've completed row number 11, we are going to just continue making a row of single crochets and a row of double crochets. We're going to alternate them. So every even number row is going to be a row of single crochets, and every odd number row is going to be a row of double crochets. As simple as that. So now 11 was row of double crochets, row number 12 is going to be a row of single crochets, row number 13 a row of double crochets, and so on and so forth. We're going to make plain simple single and double crochets all the way till we reach row number 20. Your row number 20 will be a row of single crochets, just simple plain single crochets. That'll be the end. That'll be your row number 20. So just alternate between single and double crochet rows till you complete row number 20, and we'll start row number 21 together. So now for the next row, you just chain once, turn your work around, and start making your single crochets. So just do that and complete row number 20 and meet me back here, and I'll tell you what we do next. Before I let you guys go, just grab a couple of stitch markers and mark this row of single crochets. So now this is the row of single crochets, that's row number 10. Just mark that row on either side with your stitch marker. We will need it later. If you don't mark it, it's still fine. We can obviously just count our stitches and work our way up, but marking them right now will just make it easier. So I've marked that stitch of that row number 10 where we have that row of single crochets. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed 20 rows. I have completed row number 20, that is the row of single crochets. What I want you to do is mark this 20th row with stitch markers on either side, like we did row number 10 earlier, like we did that row. We're just going to mark both sides of these stitches with a stitch marker, so we know that's row number 20. And why I'm marking this is because this and this is the start and the end of the back section of our mobile pouch. So we know that stitches after this belong to the front of the bag, and stitches before this belong to the flap of the bag of the card pouch. Now for row number 21, we are going to actually have a row of simple double crochets like we've done in these previous rows. So our 21st row is going to be a row of double crochets, regular double crochets, and row number 22 is going to be a row of single crochets. So now after this 20th row, after you place these markers, go ahead and make the next two rows. That is first a row of double crochets. So I'm chaining twice, turning my work around, and working one double crochet into each of the stitches like we've done in the previous rows so far. So I'm going to first make row 21 with 23 double crochets and row 22 with 23 single crochets. So I'll meet you guys back after I've completed row number 22. That completes the last single crochet for row number 22. So now this is row number 20 and I worked 2 rows above that. Now the next row we are going to start making our front post stitches. So we chain twice and we'll turn our work around. So now this is row number 23. So first, as per, we are going to make one double crochet in that first stitch, and then we'll make a front post treble crochet into that next stitch. So yarn over twice and skip that 2 chains, skip that first double crochet and into the second double crochet. Around that we pull up our loop and make our front post treble crochet stitch. Now you know the drill. We alternate our double crochet and front post treble crochet stitches. So we skip that stitch and into the next stitch we make a regular double crochet. Then yarn over twice and skip that double crochet on the previous on right next to that front post stitch and into the next double crochet. Around that we make our front post treble crochet and we continue this row till we reach the end. Our last stitch, our second last stitch, we'll have a front post treble crochet around the double crochet, the second last double crochet here, and on the last stitch we will have only a double crochet. So complete that, and that completes our 23rd row. Our 24th row will be a row of single crochets. So I'm going to complete row number 23 and row number 24, and I'll meet you guys back to do row number 25 together. So for row number 24, like we've just done, you just alternate with double crochets and front post stitches. I've already started you off, so it'll be fairly easy, and I've already told you that your front post stitch will come into the second last double crochet of this row, and in the last stitch you'll have a regular double crochet. So once you're done with that, that completes row number 23, and row number 24, like I said, is a row of single crochets. So complete both these rows and we will do row number 25 together. With this stitch completes that last single crochet for row number 24. Like I said, I've completed 2 rows. One is this front post and double crochet rows and 1 single crochet row. So now you can already start seeing the pattern. Now after this single crochet rows, we have another row of double crochets and this alpine stitch, this front post stitch pattern. So for this row, we chain twice and turn our work around. Now if you remember, we had a similar situation when we were making the flap of this bag in the last few rows, the 7th row to be specific. What we did was, what I told you was, our next row of front post stitches are always around these double crochets of the row of this row which sits in between the front post stitches. So now what we are going to do is we are going to make our front post stitches around this double crochet, but then there is also 1 double crochet before this front post stitch, and since there's only 1 stitch before this one, it has to be a double crochet. And every time you have a front post stitch, the stitch on top of that has a regular double crochet too. So now that once we have 2 chains, that's our turning chain, we make our first stitch, which is a double crochet in that first stitch. Now we yarn over, and into that next stitch, since it has a front post stitch underneath, we make another double crochet. Now into the next stitch we'll make our front post stitch. So yarn over twice, go around this double crochet in between both the front post stitches, yarn over, pull up your loop and make your front post stitch. Now after this front post stitch we have to make 1 double crochet, so yarn over once, skip that stitch and into the next stitch make a regular double crochet. Now you continue making this front post stitch and double crochet till you reach the end of this row. Like at the start of this row, we'll have a front post treble crochet around this double crochet before this front post stitch, and that'll be on this stitch, and then you will see that you have 2 stitches remaining. into the last 2 stitches you will have 2 regular double crochets. So that's 1 double crochet into each of these stitches. So once you come to the end of this row, I will meet you guys back to tell you what we do next. So just go ahead and complete your row. I've started you off. After this double crochet, go ahead and make your treble crochet. You know the pattern already. Just go ahead and make the same stitch, make the stitches till you reach the end of this row, and I'll meet you guys back in a bit. As you can see, I'm on my last stitch. That is the second double crochet on the last stitch of row number 25. Now once you've completed row number 25, we have these patterns that are already falling in place. So you have these front post stitches in alternate rows. Now what we're going to have to do is we have to repeat row number 22 all the way through to row number 25. That is the last 4 stitches, last 4 rows. That is this row of double crochets and front post stitches, the previous single crochet row, the row of these front post single crochets and front post treble crochets, sorry, and the row of single crochets before that. So that's the number of stitches, that's the number of rows that we have to repeat. So now when you see, you can see that our rows, every alternate row is a row of double crochet, is a row of single crochets. So after we have these rows of double crochets and front post stitches, our next row will be a row of single crochets, which is exactly the same as row number 22. If you go back and see, you will come to know where row number 22 is. We made a row of single crochets. Next is row number 23, where we have this pattern, where we start off with 1 double crochet and then 1 front post treble crochet, and then a double crochet and a front post treble crochet. And you already know that the front post treble crochets go around the double crochets from the row prior to this row of single crochets. So that's how we do that row. And then we go ahead and do a row of single crochets, which is the same as row 22 or 24. It's the same. And then row number 25 is this row that we just did, where we start with 2 regular double crochets and then a front post stitch. It's going to be very easy for you to do because, like I said, if you really get confused as to how to start, once you make a row of single crochets, whenever you're going to make your front post stitch will always be around the double crochet that we haven't used and in between these front post stitches. So it's going to, and the first and the last stitch will always be a regular double crochet. So now you just have to adjust your pattern accordingly and do it. You don't have to think much. Just go back and see row number 22 through to row number 25, and it's the same thing. So now I'm going to repeat row number 22 all the way through to row number 25 2 more times. So I'm going to make a total of 8 more rows till I reach row number 33. Once I reach row number 33, that the last row will be exactly like this. I will meet you guys back once I've completed row number 33. So just make sure you repeat row number 22 all the way through to row number 25 2 more times. So that's a total of 8 more rows of these stitches. So just go ahead and complete your pattern. It's very easy to follow. If you're getting confused, if you don't know what you're supposed to do, just go back to the spot where we started row number 22 and do it. Just follow the pattern. Alright, so I'll meet you guys back once you've completed row number 33. Here with me, I've completed row number 33, like I said, and this is how the piece looks. Let me just zoom out and show you how our work looks so far. So once we've completed this row number 33, this is how our piece looks. This is the 10th row and the 20th row. The stitches between these 2 rows are the back section of our pouch, and you can very clearly see the design, the Alpine pattern. So this is how the card pouch will fold, and we of course still have that card slot to complete. we still have a little bit of work on this piece to do as well. So now this is the front section and this is the back, and you can also see that the back is very smooth. It's not nothing's going to get stuck in between, and you don't have too many gaps, or the pattern's very smooth for the back and for the inside of the pouch as well, so you don't really need any lining. Now what we have left is in this whole section we are going to make a row of single crochets all along the sides, on all the sides of this section facing up, just so that we have neat borders and we can make these cross stitch pattern on that single crochet. That's where we'll make these cross stitch stitches, and we'll also have those single crochets along the sides where we're going to be folding the pouch and joining them together, so you'll have a neat side for all of that. Now this is how we've completed our work. We will make a row of single crochets along the length of this pouch, then to the small section, and we'll work our way back to this top and work a row of single crochets right on top. So that's how we're going to work our border. So now I'm going to turn my work, this is how we ended this row. So I'm going to turn my work like this, so that the last row actually sits on top of the row that we've just completed. So now I'm turning my work like this, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to make the border of for this pouch with single crochets. Let me just zoom in and show you how to start this piece, the border section. Like I said, I've turned to face the longest side of our work. Now what we're going to do is, this is where our last stitch was. Now we're going to make chain ones, and we are going to work single crochets in these stitches. So now we know that this row over here is a row of double crochets, and that and the front post stitch, and the row below that is a row of single crochets. So what we are going to do is we are going to make 2 single crochets alongside each of the rows where we have these double crochets, and 1 single crochet alongside the row where we have this single crochet. So this is our single crochet row. You can see the single crochet here, and these are double crochets. So we will make 1 single crochet against every single crochet row and 2 single crochets against every double crochet row. So now we know that this row is, the last row was a double crochet row. We've chained once, and we will make 2 single crochets alongside this double crochet. So what I like to do is I like to grab any one loop on the first half of the double crochet. So I just go under one of these loops on the top half of the double crochet, pull up a loop and make my single crochet. Now I go under just one loop in the bottom half of the double crochet, pull up a loop and make 1 single crochet. So now we have our 2 single crochets against that double crochet stitch. The next row obviously is our single crochet rows, and you can also see those single crochets over here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go under one of the loops of that against that row. So I'm just going to go under this loop over here, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. And likewise we have come back to that stitch where we have a double crochet, so we just go under one of these loops on the first half of the double crochet, make our single crochet, go under one of the loops on the bottom half of the double crochet and make a single crochet. So now we've completed 5 single crochets. The next one, like before, is going to be a single crochet row. You can see that single crochet there, so we're just going to go under one of these loops and make our single crochet. There is no hard and fast rule as to which stitch you actually make which loop you go under to make your single crochets alongside these stitches. I just like to be consistent and just go under one of these loops, because what it does is it makes the single crochet less bulky as opposed to going all around these whole double crochet. If you went around the double crochet, you could make a whole single crochet, but then that single crochet just seems to be bulky and always creates a gap in between. So I prefer not doing that and just going under one of these loops of the stitches. It doesn't matter which stitch it is, it doesn't matter which project it is. I still just, when I'm making stitches alongside the rows, I like to just go under one of these loops, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. It just makes the project look a little neater, and you can already see that the single crochet sits flat against that piece and it's not jutting out and it's not looking out of shape or size, and that's why I like it that way. So now you have to continue doing that. Just pull the stitch marker out, it's okay, and if you can, put the stitch marker back in its place. If not, don't worry about it, you can pull them out and we can fix them later. I'll tell you how many stitches you've got to move, but if you can, just put these stitch markers back in those stitches where you have these single crochet rows. Once you keep going down here, you can see that we have this slope along this side. You don't have to do anything different, just go along this. So now this row is a double crochet row. You have 2 double crochets here, you finish that, then you go into these are the double crochet rows. This is single crochet stitch, so you'll make a stitch here and then you'll make 2 single crochets here, 1 single crochet here, and just along these stitches where you have these front post stitches, just don't work your single crochets on these front post stitches. Grab a loop a little on the back of those front post stitches, or in the stitch prior or later to that. Just do that and complete your stitches, and go ahead and make 1 stitch along each of these stitches. No need to increase or decrease along these corners. You don't have to do anything different. Just make 1 stitch along these stitches and come all the way to the end. So just continue making your single crochets all the way to this corner, and I'll meet you guys back when you reach this stitch over here to do the corner stitches together. I'll meet you in a bit. I have worked my single crochets all the way till I reach this flap, the corner of the flap. As you can see, I've also placed my stitch markers. Don't worry if you haven't. If you've pulled them out, it's all right. And you can see that I've not the corner, the slope actually looks neat, and you don't have to really do much. And also, like I said, I did not work, I worked behind one of these loops of the stitches, behind these front post stitches, and you can see that. Okay, so now once you reach this corner, you'll notice that we've made this last stitch over here. So what I like to do is I like to make a chain for the corner and then go under both these loops that you can actually see of your first stitch. That's the first stitch. Just go under that, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. So now what this chain does is it kind of acts as your turning point. It gives you that space, enough space for your work to turn, also gives you that defined corner. We don't need a very, very sharp corner. We kind of just need those loops over there so that you have that space. So I like to make it with a chain. You can choose to have 2 stitches on either sides. It's up to you how you like to do. I like to do it this way. So I'm doing that, and now I'm going to go under every one of these loops till under both the loops of every one of these stitches and make a single crochet. These were our foundation stitches, so we should have a total of 15 stitches after the chain. Once you've completed 15 stitches, you'll reach this corner. Then you chain once, and then you start working along these corner stitches like we did on this side, all the way till you reach this corner over here. Once you reach this corner, chain once and work 1 stitch along each of these stitches that we've made. That's row number 33. Make 1 stitch on each of these stitches under both these loops. So just make sure you go under both the loops when you're making your single crochet, and then you reach this last stitch. Once you reach the last stitch, we are going to make our slip stitch and cut our yarn, but before that we need to add a chain over there. So once you make your last single crochet, come back and I show you how I like to do my last stitch, which kind of has a which kind of will look like you don't have any joint over there, which makes a seamless joint. So come back and I'll show you how to do that. So from here, just make sure in each of these corners you add a chain, and then you make the same number of stitches that you have on this side. Just make sure you have, if you want, you can count the number of stitches from this corner, from the first stitch to this corner, and make sure you have the same number of stitches from this corner to this corner. Now I'll meet you guys back once you've completed all your single crochets and you've reached this stitch here, and we'll do the last chain and cutting our yarn together. This stitch completes 23 single crochets after this corner chain on this side. Now if you remember, we made a chain and then we started with our single crochets on this side. So this chain was just actually our turning chain, and it's not the chain that sits on this corner. So technically between both these single crochets we're supposed to have a chain. So you could make a chain. Ideally you would just make a chain and slip stitch onto this first single crochet and cut your yarn. But when we do that, it kind of has this bump kind of feeling, which I don't really like. So what I like to do is, after making so I just pulled out all the stitches till that last single crochet. Once I complete the single crochet, what I do is I pull this loop long enough, just long enough to make a stitch and to make a chain and weave the tail in, and I cut my yarn in that space. Now I pull the loose yarn out, and now we have a yarn that comes out from between this stitch, that last stitch of ours. So now what I'm going to do is we are going to create a chain with this loop and the next stitch. So now we want the chain to be in between this single crochet and this single crochet right here. So what we are going to do is we are going to insert our hook under both the loops of that first single crochet. We're going to grab this loop from the front of the work and we're going to pull this loop to the back of our work. So now you can see that we've actually created a joint from this last single crochet to the first single crochet. Now we're going to grab this yarn, the loose yarn, and bring it back to that last single crochet stitch. Now we're going to insert our needle under this stitch. This is the last single crochet. We're going to insert it under that stitch, and instead of inserting it just under this one loop over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook into the stitch right in between, like so. Now you can see that we put our hook only through one of those loops and right in between that stitch. So instead of just going under one of these loops, if you turn your work behind, you can see that there's a tiny loop underneath that top V stitch. So this loop right here, the one that runs parallel to the stitch on top. So we are going to insert our hook under both these loops and pull that hook through. So I'm going to insert my hook under this loop and the loop on top, and now you see that your needle's actually coming out from in between the V stitch. Now grab this yarn, the loose yarn, and pull it through from the top of that stitch out to the bottom of that stitch through both those loops, like so. So now if you see, if I tighten this yarn, you will see that this is that stitch that we've just created. That is our chain, and you can't, if you actually look at it, you can't really see which one of them is actually the stitch that you've made to complete your work, and you don't know where it started and where it's ended. So this is the seamless joint that I was talking about. This kind of makes the project look very smooth and very professional. So I like to do this. So now this is the yarn that we have, and you can see that it's out from this stitch. Now I'll just make sure that I weave it in well and that I hide this tail like I would any other stitch. So this is a kind of the corner stitch that I like to do, and the stitch that we just made, this one right here, is technically supposed to be the chain stitch that we've made in each of these corners. So now this is how our piece looks. Let me just zoom out and show you how the piece looks. This is how the piece looks, and you can see that you have very smooth corners. It will be very easy for us to join it, and we will not have to do much later to smooth out the edges. Now that this piece is done, just make sure you weave your tail in, and let's move on to the next piece. We are going to make this belt strip to hold our flap in place to secure it. So for that, grab your yarn, make a slip knot, and make the same number of stitches that we have when we complete our work. So we had a total of the maximum, the width of our pouch had 23 stitches. So what we are going to make is we're going to make 23 chains. Here with me I have 23 working chains. Now we'll make 2 additional chains. They are not counted as stitches, they just are turning chains. We are actually going to make 1 single crochet into each of those first 23 chains that we'd made. So now we skip these first 2 stitches, the chains that we just made. Those are our turning chains. We yarn over and work into the 23rd chain. So we skip the first 2 chains, and like as per usual, I like to work into these back bumps, and I'd suggest you try to work them in the back bumps as well. It kind of makes that the strip that we're making even on both sides. So insert your hook under that bump at the back and make a double crochet. Yarn over and make another double crochet in the next stitch. So into that back bump, I make my double crochet. Yarn over, go under the loop and make 1 double crochet. So continue making 1 double crochet into each of those 23 chains that we had made. So once you come to the end of this row, you should have a total of 23 double crochets in your work. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed 23 double crochets. I'm just completing the last of my 23 double crochets for the strip. Now to make this strip a little more, to make it structured and stable, what we are going to do is we're going to make a row of slip stitches all along this double crochet row. So now the reason why I asked you to work on the back bump, you can see that if you look from the top or the bottom of these double crochets, you can't really identify which way you've worked the double crochet. Of course, people who crochet know that the double crochets are straight that way, but if you look at the bottom or the top, you can't really identify which is the bottom or the top, and it has these even chain look. That's why I like to do it this way. Now for the corners, what we are going to do is, like we did for the bag, we are going to chain once, and we are going to make 2 slip stitches against the double crochets that we have, the double crochet that we have. So just go under any one of these loops of the double crochet, pull up a loop and make a slip stitch. Go under the second half of the double crochet, just under any one of the loops of that double crochet, pull up a loop and make a slip stitch. Now chain once, and now you can see that we have these loops, these double crochets. So now go under this is actually a foundation chain. You go under both the loops of that stitch that you can see, you pull up a loop and make your slip stitch. Now we have a chain, and then we have these slip stitches. So now we go under both the loops of the next stitch, pull up a loop and make a slip stitch. You continue making 1 slip stitch on each of these stitches until you reach the end of this side. Once you reach the end of this side, you chain once, and here we'll have actually the turning chains. You make 2 slip stitches on those turning chains, then you chain once, and then you start making your slip stitches alongside this side of the double crochet, and come all the way back to the starting point of where we've started these double crochets, and where we started these slip stitches. So once you come to this end of this side, so work your slip stitches all around. Like I said, chain once, 2 slip stitches against these turning chains, chain once, slip stitch all along this side of the double crochet. Once you come here, I will show you how to do the seamless joint, or if you're comfortable with doing it, please go ahead and complete it yourself, because I'm going to use the seamless joint the same way I did to complete the main piece of our bag. I'm going to make a chain with the loop that we have. But if you come back, I will show you how to do that seamless joint again, and so you can just follow me. Till then, just go ahead and make all your slip stitches all around, and I'll meet you guys back to do the seamless joint together. This stitch completes the last of my borders for the strap. Now, if you will notice that the slip stitches actually has given not just shape, but it's also kind of made your strap a little less stretchy, which is what we want. It is stretchy enough to be able to put the flap in. It's also sturdy enough to hold the flap in place, and this is not going to stretch too much. So that's the reason why we have these slip stitches. Also, you will notice that the edges of the double crochets are a little bulky, which will help hold that flap in place and not let it move. So that's why we have these slip stitches there. Now once we've reached the start of the slip stitch, as I told you before, we kind of need a chain before we slip stitch into that stitch over there. Instead of chaining once and then creating that slip stitch, I like to actually pull this loop out. I have shown you how to do this when we were making the main part of the of the card pouch. So you can do that. You can choose to do it by yourself, or you can do it along with me now again. So I've just cut my yarn out and I'm going to pull this excess yarn out. Now I'm going to create a false chain stitch on top of the stitches that we already have. So just make sure that your stitch is over here. Now we need a chain around this. So go under both the loops of your slip stitch on the side of your double crochet. That's the first slip stitch. Pull this loop through to the back of that slip stitch. Now you can see that your stitch is coming out this way. Now pull this loop back and we are going to pull it through the middle of this slip stitch. So now I'm going to insert my hook from behind this slip stitch right in the center, grab this loop and pull the loop through to the back, from the center of the stitch to the back of the stitch. So now we've essentially created a chain in between over there. Now just make sure that you pull this loop through this double crochet as well. So just under these stitches. So that you have a neat chain. So now that's your chain. That's the chain stitch. Just make sure you weave both these tails in and your strip for the bag is ready. We're now going to make this piece so that we can sew it onto the back of our bag to make the card slot. For that, grab your yarn. We will make 19 working chains. So make your slip knot and make 19 working chains. This number of working chains need to be odd numbered, plus also they need to be less than the total number width of the bag. That's why 19. We'll also be making a border which will increase this width of the card pouch. So 19 chains should be perfect. No more, but you can choose to make it less if you want to make a smaller card pouch. I'm just going to go ahead and make 19 working chains. This is my 19 working chains complete. Now to make row number 1, we make 2 additional chains. These are just our turning chains. They don't count as a stitch. For row number 1, we are going to make 19 double crochets. So these 2 chains are just the turning chain. We yarn over, skip the first 2 stitches and into the third stitch from the hook, this one right here. I'm going to work into the back bumps as per. I'm just going to go under that bump over there and make my double crochet. Then I will go into the next chain, into that back bump of that chain and make another double crochet. I'm going to make 1 double crochet into each of the chains that we had made, each of the 19 chains that we had made. So we should have a total of 19 double crochets by the end of this row. I'll meet you guys back once you've completed row number 1. This completes 19 double crochets for me. For row number 2, we are going to chain once and we are going to make a row of single crochets on top of these double crochets. Before that, I would like to pull my tail to the top of my stitch so that I can stitch around that tail and I don't have to weave it in later. So I just put my hook through all the loops on my double crochet and pull this loop through to the top of the stitch. Now that once that is done, we've chained once and we're going to turn our work around, and we're going to work one single crochet into each of the stitches of the previous row. So we should, by the end of this row, we should have a total of 19 single crochets. We are making this pattern, the Alpine stitch pattern, so that's kind of why we have the repeat of the same stitches. Just the number of stitches are a little different. After row number 3 is when we will start having reductions in our stitch, so that we have a slight skew to the top of the card pouch. So just go ahead and complete 19 single crochets and meet me back, and we'll start row number 3 together. That completes the 19th single crochet and row number 2 for me. Now for row number 3, we chain twice, we turn our work around, and we're going to start working our front post stitches, which actually create our Alpine stitches. So first we chain we chain twice and we've turned our work. We yarn over once, and into that first stitch we go under both the loops, pull up a loop and make a regular double crochet. So that completes our first double crochet. Now we yarn over twice and we are going to make our first front post stitch. As you already know, we are going to make the front post stitch into the double crochets of row number 1. So we are going to go into this double crochet here. We are going to skip the first double crochet, and into that second double crochet we are going to pull up a loop and make our front post treble crochet. Now we yarn over, we skip that first stitch, and into the next one we make a double crochet. You know the drill for this one. We yarn over twice, go and skip this double crochet, and into the next one we make our front post treble crochet stitch, and then the next one is a double crochet, skip the first stitch, and into the next one a double crochet, so on and so forth till you reach the end of this row. So once you reach the end of this row, your second last stitch will be a front post stitch, a front post treble crochet, and the last stitch will be a double crochet. So I'll meet you guys back at the end of row number 3. This is how your piece should look by the end of row number 3. Now for row number 4, we chain once, and you already know that we're going to make a row of single crochets. But since we need a slope on the front side, on the right side of our work, we'll have a decrease in the number of stitches at the end of the row. So initially, for the starting part, we will start making our single crochets into each of the stitches. So I've made one single crochet into the first stitch, another single crochet into the second stitch, and I will keep working one single crochet into each of the stitches for a total of 17 stitches. That is, I will not work a single crochet into the last 2 stitches. I will work a single crochet into each of the stitch till I reach the last 2 stitches. So once you reach the last 2 stitches, we're going to have a decrease, and we can do that together. So just go ahead and make a total of 17 single crochets from the start of this row, and you will have just 2 stitches remaining, and we'll work those 2 stitches together. As you can see, I have completed 17 single crochets for row number 4, and I have the last 2 stitches remaining. We are going to make one single crochet because we only need to decrease this row by 1 stitch. We are going to make one single crochet for both those stitches together. If you have a certain way of reducing your stitch, please go ahead and make it that way. I'll show you what I like to do. So I actually like to go in, because it's a single crochet, I like to go into the first stitch, pull up a loop, and then I will go into the second stitch as well, the last stitch that is available, and pull up a loop. Now we should have 3 loops on our hook. Now yarn over and pull through all 3 loops and complete our single crochet. So essentially what we have done is we have made one single crochet by pulling up loops from both the stitches that were remaining. So this gives a more gradual slope than an indented one, so it has less gaps in between. Now for the next row, that's row number 5, we chain twice and we turn our work around. We actually want to reduce our stitches in this row as well, but as you can see, the first available stitch should technically have been a double crochet because it's sitting right on top of the front post stitch from that previous row, and the stitch after that will be a front post stitch. But since we need to reduce it, we cannot reduce it in our traditional method. What I'm going to do is, we have these turning chains, so now we're just going to keep them there, and we're going to yarn over twice. Now we're going to skip this first stitch, and we're directly going to go into that double crochet over there down here, and we are going to make our front post treble crochet. So yarn over, pull up your loop and pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through the remaining 2 loops. Now you can see that you have a slight gap. Don't worry about it. When we make the single crochets, it will kind of get hidden and it won't even be visible because your stitches are going on top of it. Now yarn over. If when you turn your work behind, you skip the first available stitch after that chain. So this is the first available stitch. The second one, you skip into the second one, you make your double crochet. Oops. Yarn over, skip that stitch, into the second stitch, make your double crochet. So this is exactly what we usually do, and you can see that the double crochet, the 2 chains, the turning chains that we have, kind of accommodate for that gap in between, and they don't look really odd. Now just continue making your front post stitch and a double crochet, alternate them. So I'm just making the front post treble crochet, and then I'm going to make my regular double crochet, skip that 1 stitch and go ahead and make your regular double crochet. So just continue making that till you reach the end of this row. Remember that on this row, because we have the double crochet available only here, your third last stitch will be a front post stitch, and the last 2 stitches will be regular double crochets. You won't have a front post stitch in those places. So the third last stitch will be where you have a front post treble crochet stitch, and the last 2 stitches will be regular double crochets. There's no increase or decrease on this side of our work. It's just going to be straight. We only have decreases on this side. So now once you come to the end of this row, meet me back when you come to the end of this row. We'll start the next row together. That's how our piece looks at the end of row number 5. And like I said, I have my last 2 stitches were regular double crochets, and the front post stitch was the third last stitch, and we've had decrease over here. So now if you count the number of stitches on your row, you should have a total of 17 stitches. These 2 chains don't count. You start counting from this first front post stitch. You should have a total of 16 stitches. Now we chain once and we turn our work around. This row is a chain of single crochet, is a row of single crochets. We do not increase or decrease at the start of this row. We are only going to decrease on this at the end of this row, that is on this side. So for the next row, we also only need to decrease the row by 1 stitch. So we will only reduce it to a total of 16 stitches. So for the first 15 stitches should be regular single crochets, that is 1 stitch into each of the stitches till you have 15 single crochets on this row. So that would mean that your last 2 stitches will remain, and we will have a decrease like we did in row number 4. We will decrease, we'll make a decrease of single crochet in the last 2 stitches. So first you make a total of 15 single crochets, and once you have the last 2 stitches remaining, you can come back and we can work the decrease together again. So now I'm just going to go ahead and start making 1 single crochet into each of the stitches till I have a total of 15 single crochets on this row. I have completed 15 single crochets on this row, and you can see that I have only 2 stitches remaining. Now what we will do, like we did in row number 4, we are going to reduce the stitch. So we insert our hook into that first stitch that is available, pull up a loop, and into the next stitch and pull up a loop. Once you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through all the 3 loops. And that is how we do a reduce on a single crochet. Now we chain twice and we turn our work around. And Now, if you see, you will notice that the first stitch technically is supposed to have been this stitch over here. It would have been a front post treble crochet. But since that stitch is not, we're not going to work that stitch, what we are going to do is we are going to yarn over, go into that first stitch, pull up a loop, and then we go into the next stitch and pull up a loop. Now we are actually decreasing over here. So now yarn over, pull through the first 3 loops on your hook, and then we yarn over and pull through the remaining 2 loops. So now this is how we do a double crochet decrease, and that's what we have done over here. So now you can see that you have this slope plus there is no gap in between. Now once we've completed this double crochet, we yarn over twice, and because we are on top of this double crochet over here, we go in around that double crochet and make our front post treble crochet stitch. It's very easy to follow if you know that you're going to just make your front post treble crochet on top of these double crochets. That's the easiest way to work this stitches. Now we yarn over, we skip that first stitch, and into this stitch over here we make our double crochet, and then we alternate with our front post treble crochet stitch, and so on and so forth till you reach the end of this row. When you reach the end of this row, your second last stitch over here, this double crochet right here, will have the last front post stitch for this row, and then you'll have only 1 stitch remaining where you'll have 1 double crochet. So this row will end with just 1 double crochet stitch at the end. Just continue making your stitches till you reach the end of this row, and I'll meet you guys back to start the next row. As you can see, I reached the end of row number 7, and at the end of this row you should have a total of 15 stitches. Counting this stitch over here all the way to here, you should have 15 stitches on your on that row. Now and also, yes, the last stitch we just have 1 double crochet, and the previous stitch was a front post stitch. So now you already know our next row is a row of single crochets. We are also going to reduce the row of single crochets, but not at the start of the row. By this time you already know that the single crochet reduction always happens at the end of this row. So you just go ahead and make a total of 14 single crochet. We only need a total of 14 single crochets in this row. So first you go ahead and make 13 single crochets. Once you complete 13 single crochets, you should have 2 stitches remaining from the previous row. And then I've already shown you how to reduce your single crochets. So just go ahead and make a reduced single crochet over there. So you should end up with a total of 14 stitches on that row. Once you've completed that row, I'll meet you guys back to do the next row together. So just go ahead and start working 1 single crochet from the start, and right at the end of the row have a reduce this row by 1 stitch in that last 2 stitches with a reduced single crochet, and I'll meet you guys back once you've completed this row. That is me completing that reduced single crochet of row number 8. So now once we've completed row number 8, we have just 1 more row, that is row number 9 remaining, and for that we chain twice and we'll turn our work around. We are going to do the exact same thing that we did for row number 5 to reduce this stitch. So what we did in row number 5 was we yarn over twice, we skipped that first stitch, and into the second stitch over here around this double crochet we just went ahead and made our front post treble crochet stitch. So just go around that double crochet, pull up your loop, yarn over, and make your front post treble crochet stitch. Now you yarn over, skip that first stitch that we actually skipped. This is the stitch for our front post stitch, and now we work into this stitch over here, the double crochet. If it's easier, just always look at the stitch in front of you and work right on top of that front post stitch just from the previous row. So it's always easier to work that way as well. So now that's a double crochet. and we continue with our pattern of alternating with our front post stitch and a double crochet. So in this row as well, like it was in the 5th row, we will have 2 double crochets at the end of this row, back to back, and our third last stitch will be where we have the front post stitch. So this stitch right here, we'll have a front post stitch, and then you'll have 2 consecutive double crochets to end this row. There's no decrease on this side, like we don't have decrease in any of the rows on this side. So just complete this row, and we are done with this piece. These rows. We only have a row of borders remaining. So just complete row number 9, and I'll show you how we do the borders. As you can see, we've completed row number 9, and with it we've almost completed the card pouch. All we have left to do is create a border of single crochets all around for a more neat and clean look. Also, the borders will help us sew our piece onto the card, onto the main pouch better. So now, once we've completed our work over here, we will start making the border on this side of the work. Now, I'm just turning my work to face the side of this piece. Like we did on the main pouch, we are going to make a row of single crochets all along this side. So for this, we first chain once, and I'm going to use the same rule that I applied when I was making a single crochet on the main pouch. Against every row that we have these double crochets in, we make 2 single crochets, and against every single crochet row, we make 1 single crochet. So I just chained once. I'm going to go into that first half of that double crochet under any one of the loop, just so that my single crochet is not bulky, and complete my single crochet. Now I go into this under any one of the loops of the second half of the double crochet, pull up a loop and make a single crochet. Now the next one is a single crochet row. I'm just going to go under that loop and make a single crochet against it. And then the double crochet row, I'm going to continue making 2 single crochets against each double crochet. Now I'm going to continue doing that till I reach the end of this row. When I reach the end of this row, I should have a total of 14 single crochets for just this side. Then we'll, like in the main pouch, we will chain once and turn our work and work our way through. Just make sure that you come to the end of this row and we can do the corner together. With this single crochet, I complete the last single crochet for this side, that is the 14th single crochet. Now, like we did on our main pouch, for the corner, we chain once. And then we are going to start working our single crochets on the bottom side of this card pouch. The bottom side, as we already know, we had made 19 working chains, foundation chains. So we will have 19 single crochets on this side as well. After this chain, insert your hook into that first foundation chain that you can see under both the loops, pull up a loop and make your single crochet. So now that is the first single crochet. You continue making 1 single crochet into each of those stitches till you reach the end of this row. When you reach the end of this row, you should have a total of 19 single crochets after that chain. I'll meet you guys back once you reach this corner. This completes the 19th single crochet for this side of the border. Now for this side, we chain once and then we will start working our single crochets. Now we do have this kind of this slant over here. Don't worry about it. Like we did on this side, we will have exactly 14 stitches on this side as well. We won't have any different number of stitches on this side. What we will do is we will just keep working one single, like we did on the other side. We'll just work 1 single crochet against each single crochet row and 2 single crochets against each double crochet row. So the first row is actually a double crochet row, and these are our turning chains. So we just chain once and then go into those chains under one of the loops, just pull up a loop and make a single crochet. This is the double crochet row, so you have 2 chains, just go under both of them, the second one as well, and make a single crochet against that double crochet row. And now once you have the single crochet row, just go ahead and make a single crochet against it, and then the double crochet row. So 1 and 2 single crochets against that 1 double crochet row. And now you've come to that that's place where the reduction starts. Don't worry about it. Just go ahead and make a single crochet like you would if there was no slant. So this is your single crochet. Just go ahead and make that. And then you have the double crochet rows. So 2 double crochets against that row. And you will notice that your work looks straight and then it has that skew on its own. The reason we don't have to do anything to actually make sure that we have a proper skew is because we have done all the hard work when we were making these rows and when we were making these reductions. And you can see that you do not have any gaps in between once you're making these single crochets as well. So just continue making your single crochets against these stitches till you reach this corner. Once you reach the corner, chain once, and then you will have a total of 13 single crochets on the top of your row. So once you reach this corner, chain once and then work 13 single crochets all the way to this corner, and then we will have that invisible joint that we will convert to a chain to join the first and the last single crochets. You can come back and I can show you how to do that, or if you already are very familiar with it from doing it from the main pouch, please go ahead and complete it. But just make sure that you have a total of 14 stitches on this side as well, otherwise your work is going to look skewed. And if you think your stitches are very tight, just make sure your single crochets on this side are a little loose, or just loose enough so that they don't pull your stitches together and they sit neatly on this gradient and it's not tugging at the stitches. So just go ahead and make 1 single crochet into each of the single crochet row against each of the single crochet rows, and 2 single crochets against each of those double crochet rows, and make sure you have a total of 14 stitches once you reach the end of this row. Then you chain once and then you start working 1 single crochet against this stitch. This is your first stitch of that top row. You'll have a total of 13 single crochets. Just make sure you've completed all of that, and then we can end this border together. Please don't cut your yarn, because I will show you we need to leave a little more yarn so that we can sew this piece onto the main pouch. So please don't cut your yarn. Once you complete this work, just wait for me and we can do the rest of it together. I have completed 13 single crochets on this side. I've completed all the other borders, and I've reached this end where all I need to do is have a chain and join to this stitch over here. So like we've done in our main pouch, I am going to make a false chain on top of it to have that invisible joint, and then create that joint in place of a chain and slip stitch. But before I cut, usually what we would do is we just pull up a loop, cut our yarn, and before I do that, what I'd like to do is I want to leave a long tail so that I can use the same yarn that I pull out the tail to sew this piece in onto the main pouch of our bag. So why I like to do that is just so that I can avoid a lot of knots and yarn. But if you're okay with just cutting and starting and joining, using a new yarn to make a joint and then sew this piece onto the main pouch, it's totally fine. I am just going to leave a long tail. So how do you measure how much space you need to leave? Usually I would leave about 3 times the length of this space that we're going to stitch. So we are going to sew the 3 sides of our pouch to the main 3 sides of this card pouch to the main pouch of our card pouch. So I would take 3 times the length from this corner to this corner, and from that corner to this corner, and to this corner. This is the only side that's going to be open, so we don't measure this side. So I will take 3 times the length of these three sides that I mentioned earlier. 1, 2, 3. Now after you measure 3 times the length of the 3 sides, I am going to leave a little more for ease to work with the yarn. So maybe just about 4 or 5 inches extra. And I'm going to cut this yarn. Now I will pull this yarn out completely, so such that the thread comes out from the center of that stitch, and create a false chain in between the first and the last single crochet of our border. So for that, I'm going to insert my hook from the back of the first single crochet and pull this yarn to the back of our work from the front. Now I'm going to put this yarn back into this last single crochet stitch. So like I said before, I like to insert my hook into this tiny bump at the back of that stitch, and also insert it through the center of that last single crochet, the top V, and pull this yarn through to the back side. So now we've created that false chain and the corner stitch for our work, and we've also made that invisible joint. Now I'm just going to leave this tail be, and we are going to make the cross stitches like we have on this side with a different colored yarn before we sew this piece onto the main pouch. So for now, don't weave this tail in unless you've actually ended this thing and you have a tiny tail. You can weave it in, and if you're going to use a different yarn to start sewing this piece, you can do that. You can weave the tail in, otherwise just leave it be. I will tell you what we will do with this tail later. Now just grab your tapestry needle and the second colored yarn, and I will tell you how much of that yarn you need to cut, and we will do the cross stitch pattern on the card pouch. To make the cross stitch pattern on this card pouch, I have with me my second colored yarn. So for the cross stitch pattern, I have realized that I need about 5 to 6 times the length of the space that we need to work our cross stitches into. So that is from this corner stitch all the way to this one. So the stitches between your chain stitches are the stitches that we are going to work these cross stitches into. So that's literally just this opening. So I'm going to measure 6 times the length of this yarn. That's exactly the size that we would require to make our cross stitches. 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's 6 times the yarn. So we also need to leave like 4 or 5 inches extra for the start and end to tie the knots in the start and the end, and also so that we have enough yarn to work with when we're working the cross stitch. So I've left 5 inches extra, and I'm cutting the yarn. Now I'm going to thread this into my tapestry needle, and I'm going to show you how we're going to make the cross stitch. I have with me the yarn that we just cut, threaded into my tapestry needle to make the cross stitch. So now we are going to make our cross stitches from the chain on this corner all the way to the chain on this corner. So that is a total of 16 stitches if we count the chains. That's because we have 14 single crochets in between and the 2 corner chain stitches. So now what we're going to do is identify the chain stitch first. So that's this one right here, this corner stitch. And we are going to make a knot behind that stitch. So I'm just going to insert my thread into one of these stitches at the back. Try to do it on the single crochet rows. Try to make the knot on these single crochet rows at the back of the stitch, because that's going to be hidden. It's not going to be visible outside. So I'm just going to insert my needle onto the first single crochet that I can find on the border of that stitch, and I'm going to make a knot. So I'm just going to make a simple knot, and I will weave the tail in later. So make sure that your knot is tight and secure, but also not too big, so it's not going to be bulky in that spot. Once we've made the knot, I'm just going to temporarily pull this loop through, this loose tail through one of these loops so that they don't come undone and that it has some hold to it. You can do that, and we will weave that tail in later. So now with the yarn that we have, we are going to look at the stitches from this angle. And if you've done cross stitch, everyone knows, you would know that you need 4 points to make a cross. But even otherwise, if you want to make a cross, you have 4 different points. That's 1, 2. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have 4 corners that you need to make a cross. Now, this stitch right here is this stitch right here. Is my corner chain stitch, and that is going to be the first stitch for us. And this stitch after that is going to be the second stitch. When we're working our cross stitch on this side, we will be working into 2 stitches simultaneously, and we will be working into this. I'm going to call this the outer side, or basically I'll just call it the right and the left. The right side loops and the left side loops of the first stitch, right side loop and the left side loop of the second stitch. That's our 4 points, and we're going to be working along these 4 points to make a cross stitch. So now we have this yarn outside on the right side of our work. We need to start making our cross stitch. For that, this is my first stitch and this is my second. Like I said, I'm going to insert my needle on the right side loop of that first stitch and come out of the left side loop of the second stitch. So now you can see that clearly. This is the right side loop of my first stitch and this is the left side loop of my second stitch. I'm inserting my hook from under the right side loop of my first stitch and then going into that left side loop of the second stitch. So we're going diagonally upward, and I'm going to push my needle through and pull it to the other side. So now once you do that, your stitch is actually under the stitches. Now we need to get this diagonally down. What we are going to do is we're going to go back into the same right side loop of that first stitch. So go under the right side loop of that first stitch and come out of the left side loop of that first stitch. So now the first time we went right side loop of the first stitch and came out the second side loop, left side loop of the second stitch. This time we're going to the right side loop of the first stitch and we are coming out of the left side loop of that first stitch, and we are going to insert and pull through. So now we've created our first diagonal, right? Make sure that the loop is tight. It's not too tight that it just forms a blob, but it is not too loose that the cross stitch falls apart. Okay, so now once you've done that, now it will be a little difficult to see that this is the first stitch and now this is the second stitch. Just tighten it. Now our needle is actually coming out of that left side loop of that first stitch. Now we insert our needle into the right side loop of that second stitch and come out of the left side loop of the third stitch. So now we've completed the first 2 stitches. Now we're going to the next 2 stitches. So that's why we work our needle into the right side loop of that second stitch and the left side loop of that third stitch. Now we're going diagonally up again, so, and pull your stitch across. Once you do that, you'll see that you've created that first cross, and like I said, if it's too tight, it's just going to seem like a blob. If it's too loose, it's not going to seem like a cross stitch. Just loosen that stitch a little. If it's too tight, just adjust your stitches a little so that it looks more like a cross stitch. Don't worry about this loop looking really long. It will get adjusted once we work the next cross stitch. So now we insert our loop into the right side loop of that second stitch and come out of the left side loop of that second stitch. This is the stitch that we already have a yarn in. We go back into that same stitch and we come out of the left side of that very same stitch. Pull it. So now we have that diagonally down. Next we have to work our stitch across. So now we find that right side loop of that third stitch, sorry, this one right here. So this is the third stitch, the right side loop of the third stitch, and come out of the left side loop of that fourth stitch. Once you've done that, we insert our needle into the right side loop of that third stitch where the yarn should already be there, and we come out of the left side loop of that third stitch and pull. Now you have that diagonal down. Now we move to the right side loop of that fourth stitch, this one right here, and the left side loop of the fifth stitch. And then we work across the two stitches. So we go back into that fourth stitch, the right side loop of the fourth stitch. Just make sure that your needle is on top of this yarn that goes under both the stitches so that it gets hidden. And then so we came out of the right side loop of that fourth stitch, and we went into the right side loop of the fourth stitch and are coming out of the left side loop of the fourth stitch. Then we go into the right side loop of the fifth stitch and come out with the left side loop of the sixth stitch and pull our loop. So now you get the gist. This is how we keep repeating our work. So we just keep moving one stitch up, across, we go diagonally up, we work across, and then go across those stitches just around. So that's our fifth stitch, so under both the loops of that fifth stitch, and go back to that sixth stitch, the right side loop of the sixth stitch, and then we move to the seventh stitch. So basically we're just moving one stitch up at a time every time we move. Now if you think like my first cross stitch doesn't really look like a cross, I'm just going to adjust it a little because it's very loose. Just make sure you move these loops around a little so that it kind of falls into place. Don't worry about it. It may also seem loose because of that knot, or it may seem a little too tight because of that knot at the back, but it should settle in once you weave this tail in. But now you can see that your work is pretty neat, and you can see these crosses, the cross stitch that you've made very clearly. In case you see these loops in between, just use your needle and push them in, tug them in, they will hide. Now you continue doing the same thing that we've done these past few stitches all the way till you reach this stitch where we have the chain space. So I will come back and we can do the last few stitches together. If you find it difficult to do this cross stitch the exact way that I'm doing it, please do it the way you find comfortable, but just make sure that you use the 4 loops that I said. So 4 loops of 2 different stitches to make that cross stitch. Doesn't matter how you make the cross stitch as long as you find it comfortable. If you want to just keep following, just go back to the start of this row when we started making the cross stitches together and make the cross stitch along with me. Just keep repeating it till you get a hang of it. It's very easy. We're going to do this more when we're joining the piece of the bag, but it should be a very easy thing to do. So I'm going to let you guys get on with making these cross stitches all the way to the end. Reach this space where you have the corners, where you have this corner chain, and we will cut this yarn out. So if you want, I will meet you guys back when I have 1 or 2 stitches remaining so we can end this work together. So now you see that I'm almost nearing the end. This stitch right here is the chain, the corner chain stitch. That's where we are going to end our work. And now I'm actually going to work that cross stitch into that chain. So now that's when this chain stitch is my second stitch right now. I'm just working that cross stitch. And the only difference now is that usually we would work from this cross stitch, we would go to the next, we'd work from this stitch into the next stitch. Instead of doing that, we end our work here. So how we're going to do that is we're going to insert our needle into that stitch like we would, but we will not go into the next stitch. We just go under the right stitch of that chain stitch and pull up a loop. Now once you do that, we will insert this needle from under that stitch. We go back into that same stitch, so we're basically undoing that stitch, but instead of undoing it completely, we are going to insert our needle such that we undo it, but we bury that yarn into one of these stitches at the back. So the cross stitch doesn't come undone, but it comes down from the top of that stitch to the back of our work. So now you can see that that stitch is actually, that yarn is actually hidden between these stitches, and the cross stitch is done. So instead of coming out that way, all I did was insert the hook back into that stitch and downwards. So it just looks like that cross stitch ended over here. So now you can see that we have a row of cross stitches, neat, tidy ones. The ones that look a little off center, just adjust them by tugging on the tail, on the loops that seem a little tight. Yeah, so that's how the stitch looks from the side, but this from the front, this is how it looks from the side, and you can actually see a very neat cross stitch pattern that you've done. Like I said, if you think one of the loops are not neat, just make sure that you adjust it a little. Now for the end, you can choose to tie a knot and weave your tail in, or you can simply just weave it in. But when you weave it in, just make sure that your knot is tied on the single crochets right on top, because those will sort of be hidden. You don't want the knot to be in the center somewhere where you're going to push your card in and it's going to have a lot of these bulky sections to work with. And since your cross stitch is not too you're not actually going to yank on these stitches, you can just weave it in a very zigzag pattern without any knot, and your work will not come undone. So if you're going to go up these stitches, down, across, in circles or something like that, your stitch will not come undone and you may not need a knot. So now this completes the cross stitch for our card pouch, and I'm going to weave this tail in, and I'm going to meet you guys back to show you how to sew this piece onto our main pouch. Here with me, I have the main piece of our card pouch, and I have this piece that we're going to use, that we need to sew onto the main pouch. So now this piece, I have woven my tails in, and like I said, just make sure that your tail is not visible, especially because these colors that we're using are complete contrast to the main piece and we don't want it to be visible. If it's visible on the back side, it's still fine, but make sure that it is not visible from the front, because this is the only side that we're going to be able to see, because this is going to be sewed on to our main pouch like so, and you won't actually be able to see what's on the other side. So we have this, and like I said, I've woven the off-white color tail in, and all that's left is this long tail that we have to work with later. So now I'm keeping this aside, and we are going to mark these 4 pins. If you don't have these pins marked already, no problem. If you have it marked, well and good. We would just need them. Those were the stitches of row number 10 and row number 10 and row number 20 respectively. So we marked the stitch that corresponds to that single crochet row. So this is the border stitch that corresponds to that single crochet row of row number 20, and this is the stitch that corresponds to that row of row number 10. If you don't have these marked, don't worry about it. I will tell you what stitch we need to mark. So just place your project like so and find the corner chain. It doesn't matter which side you're looking at. Once you need to find the chain stitch on this side. So how do you find them? Your single crochets will have 2 loops in the bottom. So if you were looking at this stitch over here, this stitch has 2 loops in the bottom, like a V. I call them the legs of that stitch, so that is a single crochet. Now this stitch has 2 V's in the bottom, that is your single crochet as well. So now this next stitch over here is just a chain, is just there, and it does not have any legs in the bottom, so that is your corner chain stitch. So you can choose to mark that stitch with a stitch marker. You don't need to really mark it, it's just for identification. So now that is a corner chain stitch. You count 21 stitches after the chain stitch. So this is the first single crochet, so count your single crochet stitches. That's 1 2 3 4 5 6. So this is my 21st stitch, and place a stitch marker on that stitch. That should correspond to the single crochet rows over here. You can very easily spot them as well. So this is where your pattern ends, and this is where the single crochet rows start, which have no pattern and which are clearly visible. Every other single crochet row will get hidden behind these front post stitches. So now here you can see these single crochet rows, and this is a single crochet against that row, so that's the stitch that we've marked. So after this chain, once you start counting this first stitch as the first stitch, so this is number 1, you count 21 stitches and mark the 21st stitch, and then continue counting your stitches and mark the 36th stitch over here. So I have 21 and 36 stitches after this corner chain stitch that is marked. Do the same on the other side as well. Identify your chain stitch and mark the 21st stitch after the corner chain stitch, and mark the 36th stitch after the corner chain stitch. Like I said, both these stitches correspond to single crochet rows, so you can see that these are single crochet rows, and this is the single crochet of that border which corresponds to this row, and I've marked them both. So you just mark these stitches and come back. Now once you come back, I will zoom in and I will show you where in this section we are going to actually place this and work. I'm just going to zoom in, and I've placed my work like so, where the flap is facing the top and this flat section is facing the bottom. I'm just going to zoom in and I will show you how to mark the stitches on the main pouch so that we can sew this onto that place. Now I have zoomed into that section that we were just talking about, so you can see that this is the correct side of that work. The flap is on top, and I'm just looking at this section over here. Now what we are going to do is we are going to mark our stitches on this row of single crochets. First we will mark our work on the left side. I'll tell you why we mark our work on the left side, because the left side is a straight line while the right side is skewed. Our number of stitches will change, so we can't mark it identically. Now what we are going to do is grab 2 stitch markers, and I'm going to show you which stitches we need to mark. Now on these row of single crochets, this stitch right here is the first stitch. Now we are going to forget about these single crochets over here. This stitch is our first single crochet. We are going to skip that and mark the next single crochet. So I'm actually marking those legs or the loops that are vertical on that single crochet. So this one. So we skip the first single crochet and mark the 2 loops of the second single crochet on that row that we just marked over here. So that's the 21st stitch from the front, from this side of the work. Just mark the second single crochet, use a stitch marker and mark those 2 loops of that stitch. Now we'll just go across to this side of the work and we will skip the first stitch. So this would actually be the first stitch of the single crochet and we'll mark this second single crochet. If it's hard for you to identify which is the corner stitch over here, what you can do is, we are supposed to have a total of 23 stitches on our work. So let me just show you that here. When you are counting the number of stitches, because we made 23 stitches alongside and then we made a border of 1 stitch on either side, the number of single crochets that you find over here should be total of 23. So if you don't know which is your first and the last one, because it's a very small project, it's very easy to count. So you start from here. So that's 1. So for temporary purpose, I'm just going to put that in. You count that as 1. Then you go to the next stitch. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And this one right here will be the 23rd stitch. How do you identify them? You can also see these tiny bumps that you see. That will let you know that your single crochets are there. So that's the 23rd single crochet. So you know that that one is the first single crochet and you will only see half of it because on the other side on one side you have a chain, that is a turning chain, and one side you work into that single crochet when we're making these borders. That's kind of why the stitch is like that. So in the same process, you skip that first stitch, which is a single crochet, and then you mark the second single crochet on this side. You should have a total of 21 stitches from this stitch marker till this stitch marker. Even if it's 1 stitch left or right, it doesn't matter, but a total of 21 stitches from this stitch to this stitch. So now if you count this, you should have a total of 21 stitches, which I do, and you can double check that to check that you need 21. Why 21? Because on this cut section we worked 19 stitches and we have 1 turning chain on either side of the work, which brings our work to 21 stitches wide. That's why 21 stitches. That's kind of why we've put 21 stitches here. Now you don't need to really count how many stitches are there over here, but if you want to, you can. We had chain and 14 single crochets and a chain. So if the chain sits on this first stitch, you should have 14 stitches over here. So how 14 stitches? A double crochet counts as 2 stitches, a single crochet as 1, double crochet as 2, single crochet as 1 again, so that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and obviously this stitch, which we did not count, that's marked, is the 16th stitch. So you have a total of 16 stitches chain to chain. Now that was the wrong stitch to be marked. Over here as well, you skip the first single crochet of that row and then mark the second single crochet. So this one right here, oops, just put your stitch mark in that spot. That's the second single crochet. And unlike the bottom section, you do not need 21 stitches for this part because we have this slant on top. If you remember, we had a total of 13 stitches on top and 2 chain stitches on the corner, so that's a total of 15 stitches. So from this stitch onwards, including this stitch, we need to mark the 15th stitch on this single crochet row. This is the first one. We skip the first single crochet and mark the second single crochet. That's our first stitch. Then we count 15 stitches from this stitch. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 13, 14, 15. So this stitch right here is our 15th stitch, and I'm just going to place a stitch marker on that stitch. So those 2 loops. If it's easier for you to count from the outside, we need to mark the 8th stitch from this side. So this one right here is the first stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Like I said, the 8th stitch, so that's perfect. Now, just make sure, it doesn't matter if your work is a little to the left. If you want to place this piece a little more to the left, it's totally fine. But just make sure that this stitch aligns with this stitch. And then you can count 21 stitches from this stitch and mark this stitch marker. And count 15 stitches from this stitch and mark this stitch. So you have these pieces. Now all you have to do is identify your chain sections, these corner chains, and mark them together. But before we mark these corner chains, what I would like to do is, if you notice, we had finished our work on this corner, but we need to sew these 3 sides of the work. But since our yarn is in this corner and I do not like to add a lot of yarn, what I am going to do is I'm going to grab this tail, I'm going to thread it basically to my tapestry needle, and I'm going to grab this yarn, I'm going to drag it all the way to the start of this section. So if you see, we're going to get our yarn all the way to this stitch so that I don't have to attach a new piece of yarn. So I'm just going to turn my work around, and I'm going to find the easiest way to do that. I'm just going to go under the loops, under each of these loops, like I would do if I were hiding my tail. But don't go zigzag, find the shortest way to the end of this stitch from the back of your work. So I'm just going under the loops of those stitches because it's the same color as the main pouch. You wouldn't have too much difficulty in having to hide this yarn. Just make sure you go under these stitches on the back side, and just make sure that you're not working your yarn is not ruining the stitches in the front. So I'm just going to go in like this and keep pulling my yarn to the other, work my yarn till I get this yarn coming out of this last stitch over here. That is but just the stitch right before that chain stitch. So I'll meet you guys back in a bit. If you are not going to do this, you could have just cut your yarn over here, woven that tail in, grab a new yarn, and you can tie a knot over here and start working the stitches the way we would, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. So I'll meet you guys back once I get the yarn over here. As you can see, I've come to the end of this section. Now I'm just going to leave this yarn be. Now this is the chain, that is the corner chain for our stitch, and I'm just going to leave this yarn be for now. You can turn your work around. If you want, you can bring this yarn to the front, it doesn't matter, or you can just leave it be because we're going to work our stitch anyway. So now what we are going to do is we're going to pin this section to our main pouch. So find these corners chain stitches where you have your chains. So now this one right here is this corner chain, and I'm going to mark it to this side with this pin and just pin it together. The same way, find the chain on this section, this one right here, this corner stitch, and pin it with this stitch marker. We're just using it to pin these pieces together so that they don't move out of place and we know where our stitches go. Now for this one, it's the first stitch that we have this, where we have this cross stitch starting. So that's this one right here. And this stitch is over here. So now once you have all your 4 pieces, all your 4 pins in place, you can start working these stitches. We are going to start working on this section where our thread is actually coming out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out to just hold the stitch on the main pouch so we know which stitch it is that I'm working. We do know that this is our chain stitch that the stitch is coming out of, And each of these stitches, we have 15 stitches, and this chain included is our 15th stitch from this chain to this chain. So what we are going to do is we are going to work one stitch on the pouch in the front and one stitch on the pouch at the back. So I'm just going to, already our thread is coming out from the piece in the front. So I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out, and I'm going to insert my needle under both the loops of that stitch and work my yarn through that space. Now it's coming out of this chain over here, and this chain corresponds to this stitch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my needle into that stitch, into the next stitch, that is this one, but I'm going to come out of the right of that stitch, from behind that stitch, like so. So just go under both the loops and come out from the right side of this stitch and tighten your work. Now what we are going to do is we are going to insert our needle. So we've come out of this stitch right here. We are going to insert our needle in between these two legs of that single crochet. So I'm just going to insert my needle into that space and come out. Now if you see, you will notice that your needle is actually having a hold over there, and just pull your work needle to the back. When you do that, you will notice that because one, it's the same color as the main pouch, you can't really see the thread over here, but it's holding on to this little leg under the V of that stitch. So now once you've come out of that stitch, just move your yarn. This is the first single crochet that we worked into. This is the single crochet that we can see. Just insert your needle under both the loops of that single crochet and pull your yarn to the other side. And when you're working, just make sure you tighten your work. What this kind of stitch does is, first, that it's invisible, and second, it'll hold this card slot tight and flush against the main pouch, so that even if you slide one card in, the card will be held onto the card pouch snugly and it won't easily fall off. So now once we've come out of that single crochet on that pouch, we come to the front of our work. So now this was the stitch that we just worked into. Now we can come out of the next stitch. Like I said, when we come out of that stitch, we come out to the right of the stitch. So this is my stitch. We come out to the right of that stitch, like so, under both those loops. And when we go back in the center of that stitch, like so. Just go in between this V. There's just make space with your needle and push your needle through. Now you can see that it's sitting flat against the main pouch, and you cannot really see any difference between this stitch and this stitch. So that's our intention. We do not want the stitch to be visibly seen, the joint. So that's kind of what we're doing. And the tighter we pull our work, the more flush it's going to sit against our main pouch. So now we work a stitch. We go under 2 loops on the back pouch. The reason we go under 2 loops on the main pouch is so that you have a lot more hold on the main pouch. If I'll just show you, if I'm tugging on one of these loops in the main pouch, you can see that it kind of forms a dent. But since we've worked into 2, if you at the same time when you pull 2 yarn, it kind of has a more even tug to that space. So that's kind of why I prefer working under 2 loops on the main pouch than just 1, so that it doesn't have a very odd look on the other side. And that side is going to be visible when we place our cards in. So now I've worked under both those loops of that single crochet on the main pouch. Just pull your yarn and come out of the single crochet. The right of the single crochet, pull the yarn and go back into the center of that single crochet. So you just keep doing that. It's easy to work the top and the bottom stitches. The bottom stitches will also fall right on these single crochets, so it will look exactly the same. So now you just continue doing this pattern all the way till you reach this end, and you have these stitch markers in place so that you know you are in line with with these stitches. So if your stitches don't align when you reach this stitch marker, just make sure you know, identify where you've gone wrong and place it. Usually you wouldn't, because you've started correctly and you're working one stitch at a time. You usually wouldn't make any mistake. But in case you do, you've missed a stitch or so, these stitch markers will guide you through. So now once you work this corner stitch, make sure that you work this chain in this corner stitch on top. You turn your work around and you'll start working on the stitches along this side. Now it's obviously we're working on the length of these stitches, but since our stitches actually just fall on top of each other, it'll be very easy to identify them. So now that is the first single crochet that we've marked. So this double crochet sits right on top of that single crochet, and then this single crochet sits on top of that double crochet, and so on and so forth. This double crochet on this single crochet on this double crochet, and so on and so forth. You can use extra stitch markers to mark these stitches so that you maintain a straight line when you're working your way through this space. Otherwise, of course, you can always count the second stitch from this corner. So this is the first double crochet and this is the second double crochet. This is the first one and this is the second double crochet. So work into this double crochet. When it's single crochets, you know, this is the first single crochet and this is the second one, so you work into those stitches. So it's always easy to identify them. Just make sure that you count the stitches from the corner. That's the first one, that's the second one, first, second, or you just follow this line like so. It's very easy to follow them actually. If you want, like I said, use additional stitch markers to mark this corners, the stitches, so you know when you're working this way that you're going to be correct. You're going to be on a straight line, and since this corner is straight, it really wouldn't be hard for you to work with. And like we did on this side, just as we went under both the loops on the main pouch, make sure that when you're working these stitches over here, you choose to go under any 2 loops instead of just one. Like I said, don't tug on any one loop when you're working this stitch. Make sure you go under 2 loops. It kind of gives a less tugging effect on the back side, and you want it to look neat on the other side, because this yarn won't be visible, but then this, if there's a lot of tugging on this side, it will be visible, and you don't want that to be visible. So just make sure when you're working the stitches on this side, you come out of the right side of the stitch, go out of the center. When you're working these stitches, just go under any 2 loops. They don't have to fall straight under each other. Like this one, they go under like so. This one, maybe just go under these 2. This one and this one. It really doesn't matter which 2 loops you go under. Just make sure you go under 2 loops so that, you go under 2 loops so that you do not have a lot of tugging effect. So I'm going to let you guys complete sewing this whole piece on by yourself. It's not very difficult, and there is no right and wrong way of doing it. If you think you would like to sew it on a different way, please go ahead and do so, as long as you are happy with how it turns out, because crocheting is a very personal thing, and everyone has different preferences. It's an art, and like I said, there is no right and wrong way of doing it. I'm just showing you the way I like to do it for this project. This is not the only way I sew my projects on. There are multiple ways. I just prefer doing this one for this project. And I'm showing you exactly what I'm doing for this project. So if you don't have an idea of how to do it, you can follow my way blindly. Otherwise, you can do it how you like. So once you come out of the front pouch, just continue sewing your piece. Just go under 2 loops at the back, come out in the front, come out to the front of this stitch, to the side of the stitch, from the right side out, and then go back to the center of the stitch, come out and continue your work. Now what I'll do is I'll let you get back to sewing your piece at your own pace, and I'll meet you guys back once you've completed sewing all 3 sides of this card pouch. Once you reach this end, all we are going to do is secure our piece either with a knot or just weave it in. It's totally up to you. If you're a beginner and you do not know how to secure that piece, come back and I'll show you how I like to tie a knot and secure my yarn at the end. So I'll meet you guys back once I've completed sewing 3 sides of this piece. You can see that I've come to the last stitch of my work. So that's the last stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come back into, so generally once you finish this stitch, I came out of that chain over there and then worked my stitch into that single crochet on the main pouch. To end this, just so that there is it's a little neat, what I like to do is I go back into that chain, stitch the last stitch on our front part of that pouch, just pull that yarn and work it back into that stitch. It doesn't matter how you do it, I'm just going back into the stitch so that I go into the main pouch. And now I'm just going to insert my needle to the back side of that main pouch so that the needle comes out to the other side. So now there are 2 things that you can do. One is tie a knot in one of these stitches, like so insert your needle into one of these loops like so, and tie a knot that you would do if you were making an embroidery stitch. So just put your yarn around the needle like so and pull the needle through. So that will cause a knot, that will create a knot, a regular knot, and you can make that twice so that you can and then weave the tail in. What I like to do is I try not to make a knot all the time, but yes, the knot will make sure that your work is secure. But since we're weaving the yarn of the main pouch in, I'm not going to tie a knot per se, because no one's going to yank on this one as much as you think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave my tail in a very zigzag manner. So I'm going to probably go down and up. So once you start weaving your tail in this kind of zigzag pattern, it doesn't matter how deep you go and how far you go, or you could go this way as well, it doesn't matter how you go. Once you weave it in any zigzag pattern, it gets very difficult for that yarn to actually come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to work my yarn down in this pattern, because this section will kind of get hidden behind this card pouch, but make sure that your yarn's not on the other side. So I'm just going to weave my yarn through this space, see, for example, that way, and just make sure that it's neat on the side that you're working, because this side will be visible. So I'm probably just going to work 2 rows down and then work my way back up into those stitches, back into that loop. So I'm just working my way back up to that stitch where we had that. Okay, so I've come to this space. Now I'm going to work my way down. As you can see, we start over here, I moved down and I've moved back up. Now you can do that a couple of more times and try yanking on this stitch. It won't come out and you would have worked your work. Your card pouch will be done. So this is how it's supposed to look, and you will insert your card this way. And yeah, so this is sewn in. Now I'm just gonna weave this tail in a little more, maybe a couple of more times, and I will see you guys back in a bit to complete this pouch. Here with me I have our main pouch where we have sewn in the card slot. We also have this tiny strip with us, so we can attach this so that we can use to secure our flap once we complete our pouch. So now we are going to pin pieces on our main pouch to fold and sew these sides together so that we can actually create the pouch. That's all that is left. When we're doing that, we are also going to attach this piece to our card pouch. So now If you remember, we had these stitch markers in row number 10 and 20, and from this chain space, if you counted the number of single crochets against the border, it was the 21st stitch and the 36th stitch. So you just marked it on both sides. That's what we had marked when we had put these when we were trying to mark the where to sew the card slot in. So that's those stitch markers. I haven't taken them out. I'm going to use them as our guide to fold and sew them in. If you've taken them out, don't worry, just put them back in. I just told you the number of stitches, so just use that. Mark the 21st and the 36th stitch on both sides from after this chain space. So that's the stitch markers here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fold these pieces together. Now this space where you can see the stitch marker down here, now we are going to fold it such that there are 2 stitches under this stitch marker. These 2 stitches under the stitch marker come to the back of the pouch, and the third stitch after this stitch marker will come to the front of the pouch. So we're going to fold it, pinch it like so, and mark the stitch after where we have this stitch marker, this one, so that stitch. And so I'm just going to turn my work around to face this way. Now you can see that this is the first stitch after that stitch marker, this is the second stitch after that stitch marker. We are going to hold the second and the third stitch together, pinch them together and mark them as one stitch. So we are actually going to start sewing, joining the sides from this stitch here. Just so that these stitches are easy to sew with when we do the stitches later, I'm marking the second and the fourth, the next 2 stitches of the stitches that we've just marked. And I'm going to pull the stitch marker from this stitch out. So now we will start working from these stitches. So now once you've pinched this side together, just keep going ahead and pinching these stitches together, 1 stitch against each other. So now once that is done, you can pull the stitch marker out and go. This is the next 2 stitches, these are the next 2 stitches, the next 2, next 2, next 2, and just mark any 2 stitches randomly in between, just so that we don't skip them, so that they stay aligned. Just go ahead and mark them all the way till you reach the stitch where you have the chain. So don't mark the stitch where you have the chain, but mark the stitch till before that single crochet space. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a few pins and keep marking them, so that I'm just going to align them like so that they're in line. And I'm marking this stitch over here. Actually, I'll mark the next stitch. So now this stitch is that stitch prior to where we have this stitch marker. Now if you see this, if you see this stitch marker will actually align with the first single crochet after that chain stitch on this side. So if you see, this is the chain stitch, this is the chain, the corner chain, and this is the first single crochet on this side, and that stitch, that first single crochet will align perfectly with that the stitch of that 10th row, that is the 36th stitch. So you can pin them together. We are going to work our way through these stitches, and you do the same on this side. So if you want to find, if it's going to be easier, you have this stitch, pull the stitch marker out, don't pull it out of the stitch, just open it and mark that first single crochet just after that chain space. So identify your chain, stitch the corner chain, this is my corner chain stitch, and go into the stitch after that, the single crochet one, and mark and put these stitches together. Now you can, if you go ahead and align these stitches like so, you'll notice that you'll have the same thing that we did on the other side. You'll have, after these stitches over here, okay, let me just mark that stitch, the next stitch is this one. If you pull these two stitches together, you should have 4 stitches on your space. You can see that 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we're pinching them together, so you kind of will just have, if you pinch all of them together, we start there. So you can either mark it this way, or you can mark it the other way around. You can have multiple pins in between. It's just for your reference. Now once you have these stitch markers in place, what we are going to do is we are also going to attach this piece to our card pouch, and when we are going to sew these sides together, we are also going to attach this strip to the main pouch. Now we are going to mark where we'd like this strip to go. This strip, when we're would ideally like to be, I would like to place it in a space like this so that it holds the flap well, and it also has enough space in the bottom of the flap. So that would mean maybe a stitch or 2 below, so something like that. If you count the number of stitches from the corner, it'll be a stitch or 2 below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this strip, identify my corner chain stitches. So now if I look closely, this is my corner chain stitch for this piece. So I'm just going to grab a stitch marker and put a stitch marker in that space. Then you have 2 slip stitches, and this should be the corner stitch on the other side. So place this side. Now I have 2 stitch markers on this piece, and I have a total of 4 stitches if I include both the stitches where I have stitch markers. So that's 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we're going to mark this strip on 4 stitches on this pouch. Now you can see that we have this first stitch. This is the cornermost stitch, the stitch after the chain stitch over here, and the one on the 10th row. So that stitch, we are not going to mark it on that stitch. We are going to skip the stitches after that as well, and then mark and then fix that strip on the 3rd stitch over here. So now if you see, you have that 1 stitch, then you have the 2nd one, and you're on the 3rd one. So I'm just going to grab my strip, make sure that it's facing the correct side, grab the first corner where we have that stitch marker, and insert it into this 3rd stitch like so. And I'm going to pin it so that it doesn't come undone. Now on the main pouch, we've pinned this side. Like I said, we have 4 stitches. The last stitch will be the 4th stitch. So what we are going to do is, this is the first one, we skip the next stitch, and then we skip the stitch after that. So that 2 of them, and now this stitch here. So if you insert your needle, you'll see that that's the 4th stitch. That's 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we are going to just use our stitch marker to go into the same stitches that we've just identified and pin them in that space. There you go. Once you have that pinned here, just go to the other side and do the same thing. Now I'm going to pull the stitch marker out. The first one is the right one, so we have the first one. Now we skip the 2nd and into the 3rd stitch right here. We're going to mark our strip. So on this strip, we first identify our corner stitches, our corner chain stitches. This one, it is this one right here, and this one right here. So now once I've identified that, make sure that it's straight, mark it in that 3rd stitch, and skip the next one, the one after that, and the 4th stitch. That's 1, 2, and the 4th one here. So there you go, your pieces are fixed. This strip will actually fit quite snug against your work. That's our intention. That's when it'll hold the flap tightly, so you can almost see it complete. All we have left to do is those borders, and we will be done. Now what I'd like for you to do is grab your second colored yarn, the one that you make this cross stitch with, and measure 6 times the length of this whole side. Now that we folded it from here all the way along this border and back to this side, so measure 6 times the length of that. How I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave an inch or so down and then measure it. So once you've measured it, measure 6 times the length of that yarn. Oops. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 or 5 inches additional to the space that you've already left, so that it's easier to work with our yarn and so that we have enough space to tie knots. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that and cut my yarn. Now I'm going to thread this yarn and I'm going to zoom in so I can show you how we work our stitches. Before I zoom in and show you how we work our stitches, I would like to tell you that we are going to start working our stitches. So now this is the correct side of the pouch where we have the card slot. Now we're looking at this correct side of the pouch from this angle, and we are going to start working on the right side, so this side right here, and we're going to work our way up around the flap and down to the other side. So now what I'm going to do is I will thread my yarn into my tapestry needle and zoom in, and we will start working our cross stitches to join this piece. So here I have zoomed in, and we are going to, like I said earlier, we are going to work from this side first, and you can see that we have left the first 2 stitches where we're supposed to start our cross stitch empty. Now we need a way to start this work. So either you start working this cross stitch and then just weave in the tail in a very zigzag pattern so that it doesn't come out, or you can invert your work like so. Insert your needle into, so just if you pinch the stitches together, if you pull these stitch markers out, you'll realize that these 2 stitches are where we are going to start working our cross stitches, and you can insert your needle into one of these loops and tie a knot at the end. By knot I mean a regular knot, like so, and you can weave the tail in later, or you can just start by weaving the tail in and then coming out with your stitches. Now I'm going to turn my work to the correct side. I'm just going to invert it back to how it was. I'm going to make sure that we are facing the correct side, and now you can see that our thread is actually coming out from the top of this bag, but we need it to come out from one of these stitches. For now, I'm just going to grab my yarn and pull it out of the cornermost stitch over here. That's not the one. So there you go. I'm pulling it out from the corner rightmost stitch. I've pulled it out like so. It's just so that we have the tail in it doesn't matter which side you've pulled your needle out, because we will work our stitches and then it kind of will change. Now what I'm going to do is, we had left the first 2 stitches that we would want to work together open. We've marked the second 2 stitches. I have also marked the 3rd stitch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these 2 stitches out as well. Now we have done this cross stitch over here when we were working these loops. We are going to do the same thing, but this time, instead of considering one loop of each of the stitches as one point of the cross stitch, we are going to consider one whole stitch as one point of the cross stitch. So we will work into 4 single crochets at one time to create a cross stitch pattern. So that's this 2 stitches and the 2 stitches after that. And we're going to follow the same pattern that we did when we were working those cross stitches for the card pouch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my needle into, so now that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are the top 2 stitches and these are the bottom 2 stitches. Now I'm going to insert my needle from the bottom right corner of that stitch and come out of the top left corner. I'm sorry, I need to go under both the loops of that stitch and come out of both loops of that stitch on the top left side. So like you can see, I've left this stitch, this is the first stitch, this is the first stitch of this side, this is the first stitch of this side. I worked from the first bottom right stitch to the left top stitch, and I'm going to pull my yarn through, and I've gone under both those stitches and both the loops of both the stitches. Just pull your yarn out. Now align them such that these 2 stitches are together. Just use this, if your stitches move around, just use the closest stitch that are pinned together and tug on them, and then these stitches will just fall in place. Now once you come out of the top stitch over here, you go back into the stitch that we started with, that is a right bottom stitch, the 2 loops of the right bottom stitch. Now you go into the 2 loops of the left bottom stitch, both sides, and pull through. So we are already starting to make our cross stitch. Now we have to go and just make sure your stitch is quite tight, because you need to sew them together, and it kind of needs to be tight from the beginning. You can't let it be loose. Now we are going to insert our needle into the top right stitch that we have not touched so far, and go into the stitch where we have the stitch marker, so the next 2 stitches to the loops of the next 2 stitches. So I'm just going to grab a stitch marker and mark one of these top 2 stitches, these 2 stitches, so that we don't work into that for now. And I'm going to pull the stitch marker out from the 3rd pair of stitches. So now we have inserted our needle into the right side top of that 2nd pair of stitches, and we come out of the left of the 3rd pair of stitches, left stitch of the 3rd pair of stitches, and work our cross stitch. Now this is exactly what we did when we were working those the cross stitch on that card pouch, but just that we are using 2 loops instead of 1, and we're joining both the pieces. So now come back into that stitch, the 2nd pair, the right of the 2nd stitch, and come out of the left stitch of that 2nd stitch, like so. And make sure you keep tightening your stitches when you're working them, tight enough to hold your work together. Now you go into the top 3rd stitch, the right side stitch of the third pair, and come out of that 4th pair left side. So now I'm going to move the stitch marker 1 stitch up, 1 pair of stitches up. We're doing that so that we don't get confused with which stitches we're working. So now we're going up diagonally. This is exactly the pattern that we used when we were doing that card pouch. You should be very familiar with this. And I'm just pulling my yarn together. Now if you think that your cross stitches are a little loose, just make sure that you tug on your stitches and make them tight and secure them well, because this stitch is not for show alone. Like I said, it is going to hold your pieces, this whole pouch, together. So I'm just going to continue doing this, work my stitches. You are already familiar with it, so I'm just going to go parallel to the other stitch. So from the 3rd piece to the 3rd one, I don't know if it's the third one, yes, 3rd one, the right 3rd stitch to the left 3rd stitch, tighten my stitch while I go. Now from that stitch to the next stitch diagonally up. You keep doing that till you reach the place where you have that strip that we have to work with. So that'll be a couple of stitches that you go ahead and you do know how to work these cross stitches. We've done that before, like I said, and I've just shown you how to do them again. So continue using that pattern to work your way up to this stitch where we've marked this strip to our main pouch. So I'll meet you guys back when you reach the stitch which kind of needs to be worked into these loops where we have this stitch marker. I'll meet you guys in a bit. You can see I've worked my way up to this stitch where if I work my stitch diagonally up, I'm actually working into that stitch where we have that stitch marker. So now what we're going to do, I'm not going to pull that stitch marker out because I don't want to miss any of my stitches. So I'm working into that stitch from down and I have to work my way diagonally up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider the left two stitches of the piece. We know the left two stitches of the piece and we know the right stitches of the piece. We are also going to consider the stitch where we've marked that stitch on that strip to be the same as the stitch on the left side. So if we were working into this stitch on the left side, we'd work into these two loops and these two loops simultaneously, and we would consider that one stitch, and we would consider this right side stitch separately. So just keep that in mind. That's how I'm going to work these stitches. So now I'm going to work my way diagonally up. So from this stitch, now I'm going to move into that stitch where we have that stitch marker. So I work into that left two loops of that the stitch on the left side, and I also work into that stitch where we have that stitch marker on that strip. So now you can see that we have 6 loops on our hook, on our tapestry needle, and we pull through all of them. Just make sure that you're tugging quite tight and your stitches will not come undone. Okay, so now we have to work into the stitches, into these stitches on the right side. So now we have to work into this stitch and this stitch, like so. This doesn't count as the stitch where we have that stitch marker, so we're just working into under 4 loops instead of 6, right? So we come across like so. Now I'm just going to pull the stitch marker out. If you're going to get confused, please don't pull them out. You can pull them out only from the 4 loops that we worked, or not from all of them. But you can pull them out now because you will know which stitch you're working into, right? So I'm just going to tighten my stitch. Pull this loop. Now we work into that stitch. So this would be the stitch where we had that stitch marker. Now we work into that stitch and we work diagonally up. So when we work diagonally up, like I said earlier, we are going to work into the 2 loops of that left side and 2 loops of the next stitch on that strip as well. So now till we have the strip for these 4 stitches, these two this side and this strip are considered one side, so one corner of that cross stitch. So you just work them together. Of course, if you find it difficult to add them like so, you can add them separately with a regular green yarn after you make this cross stitch with the 2 sides. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and join these pieces together. Now we work these 2 loops and 4 loops on this side. So just make sure whenever you're working this side, you have 4 loops on your hook. So now you have a total of 4 on this side and 2 on this side. Oops, I just left 1, 2, 3 and 4. Oops, there you go. It's a little tricky there, but there you go. I got those 2 loops. Now you can see I have 6 loops on my tapestry needle, and I'm going to work through them. Don't be in a rush when you're trying to attach these pieces. It's not difficult. It's just adding 2 more loops to one side. Just be very patient and pull your work together, and you should be able to secure it well. This kind of makes it very easy to secure the piece, all of them together. So that's kind of why we're doing it like so. Okay, now once I've done that, I need to work my stitches across diagonally up. Like I said, when you work diagonally up, make sure you're working into 2 of this side and 4 on the other side. So there you go. I've worked in under this stitch, and sorry, not this one, this stitch. So 2 loops on this side, oops, and 4 on the other side, like so. And then we have 6, and you continue doing that. So you continue working like so. Working with total of 6 loops on your hook till you reach this last stitch. And once you've completed these stitches till you reach this corner stitch over here, you're just going to have regular cross stitch pattern like you did over here. It's just the same thing. Once you come to the last stitch, we have to work into this chain stitch as well, but not completely. We don't need to attach it to this side. So once you reach this stitch over here, come back and we'll work the next few stitches together, and I'll show you how we transition from this joint to the flap section of our work. And make sure that you work this strip together properly. It's not hard. You just have 2 more stitches to go on your own, and it's the same as what we did all this while. Just continue doing that, and I'll meet you guys in a bit. As you can see, I've worked this space where we have the stitch marker. The stitches will be slightly fatter, maybe wider than the other stitches. They may not look the neatest, but it shouldn't really matter, and you can obviously always adjust it a little to the left and right so that the cross is aligned properly, but then you can do that later. Now where I've come is I've reached that stitch where I've come out of that stitch where I have that stitch marker. So technically that's my last stitch. That should be the last stitch. So once I work this stitch across, we would technically, now I'm going to pull the stitch marker out, and notice that this stitch over here, I'm going to put a stitch marker there, is where our chain stitch is. I'm going to put that stitch there, and I'm going to pull this stitch marker out. Also, I'm going to place a stitch marker in this spot where we do not have to join any work. So this blue stitch marker here is where we have the chain, and this stitch marker here is the first stitch without any joint. So I'm going to pull this stitch marker out. Any stitch in between that is supposed to be attached together. Now once I've done that, once I've worked this stitch, I need to work, ideally I would have to work a stitch across. Now I have to come down, so across like so, which would be trying to join our pieces together, which, oops, sorry. I have a bit of tangle over there. Real struggles, like real struggles working with yarn. So I'm just tightening my work as I go. Now the next stitch is supposed to be here, and it is supposed to go diagonally across into the next stitch, which is this stitch over here, which is the chain stitch, which we are going to go into. Just grab under that stitch where we have that stitch marker. I'm not pulling that stitch marker out, so we know that that's the chain stitch, and we secure our piece. Now we have to work under the stitch after that, so under that chain stitch we do that. and secure our work. Now we are going to start working into these flap sections. We are not going to work back into that chain stitch. We've worked that once and that's about it. So we will not work into the stitch where we have this chain. And we are going to start working into the stitches on this side of the flap. So now all we have left is the flap stitch. I'm going to pull the stitch marker out. And we are going to make the cross stitch exactly the same way that we did when we were working our cross stitches on the edge of this card section. So what we're going to do is we are going to consider the left side of the loop, the right side of the loop as two different stitches, two different points of the cross stitch, and the next stitch the left loop and the next stitch the right loop as the next 2 points. Now we're going to work under this one loop only, and we need to go diagonally up. So instead of going into the loop right next to it, we will go into that loop which is diagonally up like so. That is the left side of the next stitch. There you go. Now we've transitioned from joining our pieces to working only on the flaps. Now we need to work this stitch along this side of the loop. So we work into that first stitch, the right side loop of that first stitch on the flap and the left side loop of the first stitch of that flap, and we go across. So now, like I said, we're just working into those loops of that flap, and we're going to consider those loops as 4 different points of our cross stitch. Now work into the right side loop of the second stitch, and then go diagonally up to the left side loop of the third stitch. And with this you'll be able to see a cross stitch forming separate from the joint. There you go. Now you continue doing this. We're going to do what we did when we were doing that card pouch. We are going to work only into the left side and right side loops of our single crochets. So work into this loop now, into the second loop, the right side of the second loop. Oops. It's certainly easier working into both loops of one side, joining them, than working into these loops. So now go diagonally, just go straight to the other side of that stitch under both the loops. Then you work into the right side top stitch and go diagonally up to the next stitch. The way we make our cross stitch absolutely doesn't change. We continue making it in the same way. It's just that we had to transition from the joining section of our pouch to the flap section of our pouch. So we had to do this kind of bit of movement, and we also needed to include that chain section, but not completely. So that's why we did this. Now you can see that we are doing exactly what we did when we were making that card pouch, working on this loops of that single crochets of the border. So just continue making this. It's very easy. You already know how to do it. You have a hang of making that cross stitch on that side, and work your stitches. So now you can see our cross stitch has transitioned from the joints to the flap, and it is starting to look really, really nice. So you have this border already and this section's done. We're going to work. Now what you're going to do is you're going to keep working these stitches all the way across this flap. You don't need to do anything at the curves because you need 4 loops, and just keep working your cross stitch along this whole flap till you reach this last stitch where we have prior to this stitch where we have the stitch marker, because we need to incorporate this stitch over here. That will be the chain stitch. So once you reach kind of this last stitch or the second last stitch, come back and we will transition. I'll help you transition from the flap to the joining section, and then you could do the rest on your own. So now what I'm going to let you do is I'm going to let you get back to doing your cross stitch on the flap all the way to this side till you reach this kind of the last stitch on the flap, the stitches that are not marked, right? So I'll meet you guys back once you've completed your cross stitch on the flap section of your pouch. As you can see, I worked all along the flap and I've almost reached the end of this side. So I only have one stitch remaining before we reach the stitches where we have the stitch marker. So what I've actually done is I've just gone diagonally up into that last stitch of that the flap part. So we've just gone diagonally up, and now I have to do this stitch which goes through both the loops of the previous stitch under both these loops. Okay, so this is what we have done. I'm not doing anything different from what we've done all this while. So I'm just going across, and now we have to work. I'm just going to tighten my stitch a bit, and now we have to work our stitch diagonally up again. So now this is when we insert our hook needle into that right side stitch of the last stitch of that flap and insert it into this under both the loops of the stitch where we have our stitch marker, so only on the left side. Now we are going to start joining these pieces, so we will consider both this whole single crochet, the two loops of that single crochet as one point, and the two loops of this single crochet as one point. So now we are going to insert our needle under both those loops of that stitch where we have the stitch marker. That's the first stitch where we have to start joining our work. So we insert it and pull the needle through. So now that is going to start forming that joint from the flap to the main pouch. Now once we go across there, we are supposed to go under both loops of that last flap of that single crochet, because here this single crochet, this loops, we're considering them as two different stitches. But this time we have to remember on the other side we actually included the chain which is there prior to this stitch. The stitch prior to the one that we just marked will be that corner chain stitch, and we need to include it at some point. So this is where we're going to do it. So now when you're inserting your hook under both the loops of that last single crochet of the flap, we are going to go under both loops of that chain, the corner chain stitch of the pouch. So that is the stitch prior to the one that is marked. That's why I didn't remove the stitch marker, so that you'll have an idea. So now we just go under that stitch and pull the yarn through. Now you will see that you have one diagonal done, and now we need to just go ahead and make the next one. So for the next one, we insert our needle under both loops of that of the right side of that first stitch, that is the stitch where we have the stitch marker, and we insert our needle into the stitch further ahead of it, so diagonally up the next stitch under both those loops. So that's when let me just do that. You can just pull your stitch marker out. I've kept it there for identification so that it's easier for you to know which stitch I'm actually working into. So you can see that these are the two stitches that we have right now, and this is the stitch after that. So we work from this stitch to that stitch, and I'm just going to pull my needle through. And you can also pull the stitch marker out now so that you can have a clearer view of what's actually happening. And you can see that we have our flawless transition from the flap to the joint. Now if you want, we can make one more joint together. So now once we're working the joints, we're going to work two loops together. So work the previous two loops and this two loops. So we're going to work the same two stitches, and it's the same thing that we did on the other side when we were joining our work. Now we'll work into this right two stitches and we work our stitch diagonally up. Now we've reached that stitch where we have to start joining our strap in. So I'm just going to include that as well and work my stitch, my needle through that piece. Now of course you can tighten your loops a little. I think this loop of mine is a little loose, so I'm just going to tighten that and work my stitch thereafter. So now you can see that we've done the flap and then we've started working these stitches. So now we've already started joining our work and you can't really see the difference, and you can see that there is no gap on top as well. It's perfect. Of course I had to remove the stitch marker. There's no need for that. Now you just continue making your cross stitches and joining all these pieces all the way till you reach the end. Of course we have a lot of these stitch markers as guide for us so that we can we don't miss out on any of our stitches and we don't make any mess. We don't basically lose our alignment of the stitches. So just make sure, if you think your work's twisted a bit, tug on any of the nearing stitch like so, and your whole piece will fall into place and you will have the stitches aligned. Now you continue doing these cross stitches all the way till you reach this last stitch. Once you reach the last stitch, you can come back and I'll show you how to end the our stitch over there and tie the knot and weave it in. So I'll meet you guys back once you've completely joined all these pieces. Just remember to join, now that we've started joining the strip, just remember to join them in the next 4 stitches exactly like the way we did on the other side. Of course, if you need any help, just go back to the section where we were making these joints on this side and use the same technique to do it on this side. It's just that we're working the other way around. That's it. It shouldn't make any difference. So just go ahead and complete it and I'll meet you guys back in a bit. As you can see, I've come almost to the end of my stitches. Now all I have left is this one stitch and these two. Actually this stitch corresponds to this one over here, so we are technically just supposed to work a stitch across. So this is the second last stitch of this side, this is the last stitch of this side, this one right here is the last stitch of the other side, and with this one is the second last stitch. So I'm inserting my needle under the 2 loops of the second last stitch and coming out of the last stitch. This is how we usually do it. We just diagonally going up, and then now we have to work across. We just do the same thing that we've been doing all this time. There is nothing different with it. It's just how we end our work that it's going to be a little different. So now we would have to usually just insert our needle under the last stitch. The 2 loops of that last stitch is just hidden under the other loops. I'm just going to pull them out. So this 2 loops right here, just insert my hook there. We would usually insert our needle there and then work into the next stitch. But since we do not have a next stitch, I'm just going to come out of the center of our work, just under both those stitches, and pull our needle out of that space. Of course, we can adjust where the stitch goes because we actually do not need this yarn to be coming out. We actually have to push this needle back into the same space that we've got this yarn out, and we have to tie a knot on the back side. As you can see, there is the stitch actually directly starts from a cross stitch, so it should directly end in a cross stitch. So I'm just going to insert my needle back into that space, and before that you can try to just split that space out because you're going to insert your needle into that space of your bag. So this one right here, and I'm going to push it through to the back of to the other side of the bag, so the needle and the yarn go to the inside of that space. Now once you do that, once you do that, you can see that your cross stitch is complete and your whole row is done and your yarn is gone from sight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert that section, and like we have on the other side. So now this was the side where we started. We've tied a knot. You can choose to tie a knot and weave the tail in, or simply just weave it in a very zigzag form. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a knot over here. So I'm just going to grab one of these loops, one of these white loops actually. Just go under one of these loops like so, make a knot. I'm going around the needle twice and pulling through. So this creates that double knot for me, and then I will weave this tail in. So you can cut your yarn and weave it in. I will weave my tail in and then cut my yarn a little later so that I have a longer tail to work with. So now I'm going to weave this side and this side in, and I will meet you guys back to show you the final look of that bag, of our card pouch. Here with me I have the completed card pouch. As you can see, all the effort gone into making that cross stitch clear is paid off, because you can actually spot that design from the side and from the bottom, or from this side. It's very clearly visible, and the contrast makes it all the more prettier. It's a very quick project. It barely takes an hour to finish, and there are not too many accessories to it, so you don't even really require too many things to make it look very pretty, and it has plenty of space. Also, the card pouch with the card slot to fix a card in here so that it's easy to access. I'm 100% sure there's not going to be one soul that has another card pouch like this, with exactly like this one. I really hope you liked making this project with me, and it's a very simple, easy project which looks very beautiful and elegant. If you did like the tutorial, please leave us a thumbs up. It means the world to us, and it helps us reach more people. Also encourages us to make more such videos. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comments box below and we'll get back to you. Do let us know how you get along with this project, and I'll see you in our next video. Until then, happy crocheting!